Chapter 606. While the Golden Wing Demon was still hesitating, Madame Goldenwing's gaze turned sharp as she said, "Curator, you just have to do it. My husband will obey your orders and remove the demonic energy. Whether it succeeds or not, my husband and I will always remember Curator's kindness." She actually made the first decision. At this, the Golden Wing Demon came to a realization. At this crucial moment, his wife was the one who could see things more clearly. Previously, the demonic energy had forcefully gathered his soul and he was only barely holding on. Based on the current situation, he might not even last a year. When that time came, there would be no chance at all. But now, with Curator here and the fact that he had a way to save his son, what was there to hesitate about? Even if there was only a 10% chance of success, it was better than waiting for death. The only difference was that he would be able to survive for another year. But now that his son was in this state, living might just be torture. It was better for him to be free as soon as possible. As these thoughts flashed through the Golden Wing Demon's mind, he came back to his senses and quickly bowed to Curator. "Madam is right. I will remove the demonic energy now. No matter what the outcome is, Golden Wing is willing to accept it." It was obvious that this couple had been through a psychological struggle. By making this choice, they were willing to accept the loss of their only son. While that was true, Lin Jin felt that he should give this couple some reassurance. After all, Lin Jin was 99% confident in the success rate of this operation, maybe even higher. Hence, he said, "This time, I will use acupuncture techniques to mend your son's soul. I'm more than 90% confident. Please wait outside the cave." At this, the golden-winged couple was overjoyed. More than 90% confident? This was practically a done deal. The golden-winged demon dared not delay any further. Pulling his wife along, they bowed to Curator and the fake Lin Jin before leaving the cave. Outside, the golden-winged demon looked expectant while his wife still looked worried. Despite her previous decisiveness, when it came to times like this, no one could compare to her concern for her son. "Husband, does Curator really have such supernatural powers?" Clearly, Lady Goldenwinged still had some doubts, even though he had not revealed any of them previously. "Madam, don't worry about that. If it were anyone else, I would be the first to doubt them. After all these years, we've met many people who are angling for fame. But this time, it's different. The Curator is no ordinary person. His disciple, who is also my new sworn brother, can create a sea. If his disciple is like that, there's no need to mention his master. If there are no accidents, this Curator is a contemporary immortal." "Immortal? Even if I become an immortal, it doesn't matter." "Husband, didn't you say that with your cultivation, you can also become a demon immortal?" The madam was still doubtful. The golden-winged demon hurriedly waved his hand. "That doesn't count. It's just that my realm has increased, but my abilities are still lacking. Furthermore, how can a demon immortal compare to a human immortal? When the heavenly Tao suddenly changed, it was human immortals who were destroyed. Why? It's because human immortals are stronger, and I've seen Curator's abilities with my own eyes. There's no problem." At the golden-winged demon's words, the madam was relieved. Of course, that was only on the surface. In reality, the husband and wife were still guarding the cave entrance, pacing back and forth from time to time. After all, even if the golden-winged demon believed in Curator's abilities, it was better to be safe than sorry. Inside the cave, Lin Jin had already begun his acupuncture treatment. His spirit-casting needle could be said to be the highest level of acupuncture technique. The power of his supernatural powers was definitely comparable to an immortal's skills. To a certain extent, even immortals didn't have this kind of soul repair technique. Lin Jin's acupuncture skills were now at the pinnacle of perfection. If there was one thing he was most afraid of during the soul repair process, it would be being disturbed by others. However, Lin Jin wasn't worried about this at all. With a rank 6 and rank 5 monster guarding outside, he didn't have to worry about anyone barging in and disturbing him. Hence, everything went smoothly. Fortunately, this golden-winged gentleman was still considered young among the monsters and his soul wasn't strong to begin with. Hence, the repair process was relatively easy. Lin Jin was currently focused on using the spirit refining needle to piece together the golden-winged gentleman's soul bit by bit. All he could see were golden rays that shone like stars in the sky. Normal people wouldn't be able to do anything if they saw this. Only Lin Jin was able to use his silver needles to pull back the shattered soul bit by bit and sew it back together. 4 hours passed by in a flash. Lin Jin was completely focused. When the last piece of the soul was sewn back together, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. The most difficult part about this task was how complicated it was. After all, to repair a shattered soul, one had to be extremely careful. After all, the soul was formless and the difficulty was like using a needle and thread to mend a pile of rotten tofu. Any slight distraction and all of his previous efforts would go to waste. Fortunately, Lin Jin succeeded. Currently, the golden-winged gentleman was fine. Based on his current condition, he just needed to rest for a day or two. Once his soul was completely stabilized, he would wake up. However, Lin Jin was curious. How did this golden-winged gentleman end up in this state? It wasn't difficult to destroy the physical body, but to attack the soul directly was a different story. Most people didn't have such skills. He called in the golden-winged couple, who had been waiting anxiously outside the cave. Lin Jin told them the result. When Lady Golden-Winged heard this, she cried tears of joy. She was so excited that she knelt down and thanked Lin Jin. The golden-winged monster was also overwhelmed with emotion. He couldn't hide the ecstasy on his face. He also knelt down and kowtowed to express his gratitude. Lin Jin happened to ask about the condition of the golden-winged gentleman's injuries. At the mention of this, the golden-winged couple's expressions turned ferocious. To tell you the truth, we don't know who hurt our son either. If we did, we would have turned that person's bones into ashes. The golden-winged monster's voice was laced with hatred. His wife said, "It's all thanks to Curator's divine spell that my poor son was saved. When my son wakes up, we'll ask him and we'll know." That was true. Back then, when the golden-winged gentleman was heavily injured, he tried his best to escape. In the end, he fainted before he could say anything. Hence, he had no idea who his enemy was. If he did, based on the golden-winged gentleman's personality, he wouldn't let the matter rest. That's fine. I'm curious about this as well. After all, an expert who can directly injure a person's soul is no ordinary person. When your son wakes up, we'll look for my disciple and explain the situation to him, Lin Jin said. Now that the matter here was settled, Black Wind Monster Sect was still waiting for him to return. The golden-winged couple obviously didn't dare to stop him. This time, the golden-winged monster carried the curator and fake Lin Jin on his back and returned to Black Wind Monster Sect in a matter of seconds. Admittedly, the golden-winged monster's flying speed was too fast. If he had a mount like this, he could probably go anywhere in this vast world. Chapter 607. By the time Lin Jin returned to Black Wind Sect, the banquet was coming to an end. As the sect's grandmaster, curator had to be present. After drinking a few cups of wine, the golden-winged monster bade farewell to his only son and ran back to Golden Wing Cliff. Before he left, the golden-winged monster said that when his son woke up, the first thing he would do was to thank curator and repay him for saving his life. Lin Jin nodded. Making use of this matter to get on good terms with a rank 6 demon cultivator would definitely be a profitable business. After the banquet ended and the guests left, Lin Jin went to check on Huyujin. Due to the spirit refinement needle, Huyujin was still unconscious. Beside her, Taoist who was concerned. Beneath his mask, Lin Jin wore a solemn expression. Using the spirit refinement needle to make Hu Yuzhen fall asleep was actually to protect her. Other than that, it was also to seal that strange blood talisman in her body. Now that everything else was settled, it was time to deal with this blood talisman. Lin Jin already knew where this blood talisman came from. In the past, he might have been at a loss and even had a hard time dealing with it. But that was then and this was now. He had many more tricks up his sleeves, so dealing with this blood talisman was much easier. Taoist Hu, please guard the cave entrance. Don't let anyone in. Lin Jin was issuing orders in the name of Curator, so Taoist Hu dared not disobey. After Taoist Hu stood guard at the cave entrance, only Curator and the fake Lin Jin were left in the cave. Invoking a spell, Lin Jin used the spirit refinement needle to slowly force the blood talisman out of Hu Yuzhen's body bit by bit. A blood talisman was pierced by several spirit refinement needles and was forcefully pulled out of Hu Yuzhen's body. The blood energy on the blood talisman pulsated as it tried to force the surrounding spirit refinement needles back, but failed every time. It was clear that Lin Jin had the upper hand in this matter. Who are you? Show yourself. Lin Jin changed his spell and the spirit refinement needle with the blood talisman changed accordingly. It was as if the tightly shut door had been opened halfway. In an instant, a bloody light emerged from the blood talisman. It was like a mass of blood floating in the air, rolling and flowing. It was incomparably strange. If a timid person saw this mass of blood mist twisting and deforming, they would probably piss their pants. A moment later, the blood mist condensed into a giant human face. This human face was ferocious and terrifying. There seemed to be two beams of ghostly light flickering in its eyes. It was clear that a divine soul that wasn't weak was currently looking over through the blood eye. Staring at the bloody face, Lin Jin felt like he had seen it before. Then, he remembered. It really is him. Lin Jin mumbled to himself. It was Patriarch Bloodcloak. When he saw the blood amulet in Hu Yuzhen's body, Lin Jin already had this speculation. Now that he saw the bloody face, he was even more certain of it. In other words, Hu Yuzhen was not actually injured. She was just being controlled by the blood talisman. Now that the blood talisman had been forced out by Lin Jin's spirit casting needle, Hu Yuzhen was safe. Moreover, Lin Jin had completely suppressed the blood talisman's power, so he wasn't afraid of her stirring up any trouble. In the next moment, a burst of laughter came from the giant face. Are you the curator? It was Patriarch Xue Pao's voice. Lin Jin had met him before at Jade Dragon City, and because of Yang Qingshi's incident, they had a grudge against each other. Hence, Lin Jin recognized this voice immediately. Patriarch Xue Pao. Lin Jin called out coldly. He. A strange cackle ensued. Not bad. So you know my name. You must have heard it from your precious disciple. Patriarch Xue Pao glared at the fake Lin Jin with a menacing gaze. However, Patriarch Xue Pao's threat was destined to be fruitless. Because this was a fake Lin Jin, a mere smokescreen. Forget threatening, even if someone held a knife to his neck, the fake Lin Jin wouldn't bat an eyelid. It's just a thought. Do you think I won't destroy you right now? Lin Jin couldn't stand Patriarch Xue Pao's arrogance, so he threatened him coldly. Patriarch Xue Pao's expression darkened. He couldn't possibly remain indifferent to the curator's threat. Based on the current situation, this curator was indeed powerful. The thought Patriarch Xue Pao had left in the blood talisman was no match for him. Why do you have to do this? I have no grudge against you, curator. I do have a grudge against your disciple, but since ancient times, it's better to squash enmity than to keep it alive. I, Patriarch Xue, am a magnanimous man. I won't lower myself to the level of a junior. He was clearly trying to make peace. He had no other choice. Now that Patriarch Xue Pao's thought talisman had been subdued by Lin Jin, it couldn't do anything. If he didn't make peace now, he would surely be killed. He wouldn't gain anything from this. This wasn't in Patriarch Xue Pao's best interest, so he decided to make peace and even seek cooperation. After all, he knew a lot about the curator. Just like everyone else, Patriarch Xue Pao treated the curator as an immortal expert. Lin Jin naturally noticed something as well. He coldly laughed. Ancestor Xue Pao, you schemed and schemed to inject the blood talisman into Hu Yuzhen's body, making use of her to come to my Black Wind Demon sect. Why exactly did you do that? Tell me. If I don't like it, I'm sorry, but you can forget about keeping this strand of will of yours. Now that Lin Jin had the upper hand, he wasn't going to hold back. Moreover, to Lin Jin, a demon like Patriarch Xue Pao had to be eradicated. Back then, to deal with Patriarch Xue Pao, the Daolord revealed his immortal aura and was caught red-handed by the rank 9 immortal devouring beast. He was injured and died of depression. Hence, when it came to scheming, no one could compare to Patriarch Xue Pao. Working with someone like him was like asking a tiger for its skin. Lin Jin wouldn't do something so stupid. But before that, he had to figure out Patriarch Xue Pao's goal so he could be prepared. After all, Lin Jin had planned to get rid of the threat that was Patriarch Xue Pao. Patriarch Xue Pao smirked. Curator, even if you're not an immortal, you're probably close to one. Let me ask you, do you know why there are no traces of immortals in this world? He was clearly digging a hole. Most people would definitely be very curious about this question. After all, the ancient Tao of immortals, flying in the sky and burrowing into the earth, living forever, and being free from the universe was something that everyone yearned for. Especially those experts whose strength was extraordinary, the more they yearned for it. Having said that, Patriarch Xue Pao carefully observed the curator. It was a pity that the curator was wearing a mask so Lin Jin couldn't see his expression. D***, why is he the same as that prop from back then? Why is he wearing a mask? Is he too ashamed to show his face? Patriarch Xue Pao fumed. At the curator's lack of reaction, Patriarch Xue Pao's heart skipped a beat. He could only bite the bullet and continue. Aren't you curious about the whereabouts of immortals, curator? You know? Lin Jin caught the crux of the matter. Chapter 608. Patriarch Xue Pao mentioned traces of immortals, but never mentioned the fall of immortals. In other words, this old demon knew that immortals still existed in this world. Truth be told, if this was a few days ago, Lin Jin would have been curious. But not anymore. Back in the visitation hall, Lin Jin had met Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong with his own eyes. He also learned about the current situation in the foreign lands from them. Hence, Lin Jin already knew many of the secrets of immortality. Patriarch Xue Pao was still trying to fool him with something he already knew. Of course, it was useless. However, Lin Jin was still curious. He was curious how Patriarch Xue Pao knew about these things. Of course I know. I know even more secret. Patriarch Xue Pao was brimming with confidence. He hoped that curator would continue asking him questions. This way, he would be able to take the initiative and achieve his goal step by step. However, to Patriarch Xue Pao's surprise, curator didn't ask any more questions. It seemed like he wasn't interested in this at all. Patriarch Xue Pao was shocked. His rhythm was thrown off. He mused, that's impossible. No expert in this world can resist the temptation of immortality. Why isn't this curator playing by the rules? Patriarch Xue Pao, who was a little flustered, immediately composed himself and took the initiative to speak. Curator, I can see that although your cultivation level is high and your abilities are extensive, you have yet to reach the immortal realm. If you promise me one thing, I will give you an immortal Tao opportunity and help you become immortal. This could be considered as a naked temptation. No one could resist the chance to become immortal. Who didn't know how great immortals were? Immortals were immortal, possessed supernatural powers, and were free to roam the world. Lin Jin chuckled. What's so great about being an immortal? I'm not interested. Indeed, he wasn't interested. With a rank 9 immortal devouring beast around, becoming immortals was suicidal. A Downlord was a living example. No matter how powerful a human was, it was meaningless if they couldn't defeat a rank 9 immortal devouring beast. Curator's answer clearly shocked Patriarch Schwepao. For a moment, Patriarch Schwepao didn't know what to say and fell into silence. If you have nothing to say, then there's no need to keep you. Lin Jin broke the silence. Invoking a spell, the spirit-refining needle began approaching. Patriarch Schwepao's psyche immediately sensed danger. Wait a minute, Curator, if you're not interested in becoming an immortal, then do you know that there are still immortals in this world? If you promise me one thing, I can tell you where the immortals live in seclusion. It was another bombshell. Had it been a few days ago, Lin Jin would definitely be curious to know the answer. But now, Lin Jin was sure that Patriarch Schwepao was referring to an extraterrestrial land. Since he already knew, he naturally wasn't interested. Not interested. With a flick of his finger, Lin Jin's spirit refinement needle forced Patriarch Bloodbubble's bloody face to contort. Don't. Hold on. Patriarch Schwepao was getting anxious. This was completely out of his expectations. Even this news couldn't move the Curator? He couldn't believe what the Curator was interested in. Or could it be that the Curator already knew about these things? At this thought, Patriarch Schwepao's heart skipped a beat. His imagination ran wild as he suddenly thought of a possibility. Patriarch Schwepao had been observing this world for hundreds of years, so he knew a lot of things. However, this Curator's sudden rise was an accident. It was as if he was a character who came out of nowhere, an expert who rose overnight. This didn't make sense. Moreover, the Curator wasn't interested in the existence of immortals at all. This made Patriarch Schwepao think of another possibility. Patriarch Schwepao asked tentatively with a shaky voice, "Could it be that the Curator is from the Black Mountain?" This sentence was a little more tentative. Lin Jin immediately knew what was going on. A series of thoughts flashed through his mind before he said, "There are 9 mountains in the extraterrestrial land. The Black Mountain is nothing." At this, Patriarch Schwepao couldn't even hide the shock on his face. No matter how hard he tried to suppress it, it was useless. Patriarch Schwepao was already stuttering in shock. Deep down, Lin Jin knew that his attempt to trick Patriarch Schwepao had worked. Moments later, as if coming back to his senses, Patriarch Schwepao quickly said, "I must have been blind. So the Curator is from the extraterrestrial land. No wonder, no wonder." After a pause, he quickly asked, "May I know which sect Curator belongs to?" This question obviously wasn't a problem for Lin Jin. He recalled Qin Yunshang and Chen Xuankong's sects in the visitation hall. Among them, Xian Dao sect was definitely one of the largest sects in the immortal realm with a long history. It wouldn't be a problem to use them to boost their reputation. At this, Lin Jin asked, "Have you heard of the Xian Dao immortal sect?" Patriarch Schwepao's blood-red face wavered. He was obviously shocked by this question. So the Curator is from the Xian Dao immortal sect. Patriarch Schwepao's voice was much softer this time. He even seemed to be speaking in a humble manner. Best of all, he was acting this way willingly. Other than that, there was also a hint of fawning and fear in his voice. His tone and attitude were completely different from before. "I was once tutored by Xian Dao sect's spiritual master Miao Yen, so I can be considered half a disciple of the great master. Now, Curator, you and I can be considered half a fellow disciple," Patriarch Schwepao said in a friendly tone. "He really got something out of me," Lin Jin muttered inwardly. Of course, on the surface, Lin Jin didn't show any reaction, nor did he ask any questions. After all, Lin Jin didn't know anything about that spiritual master Miao Yen of the Xian Dao immortal sect, nor did he know the details. If he spoke too much about this, he would definitely give himself away. On the other hand, Patriarch Schwepao looked excited. "Curator, let's forget about the grudge between me and your disciple. Not only will I not pursue the matter, but I'll also reward him greatly. However, I'll need a small favor from you, curator. Perhaps feeling that they were closer now, Patriarch Shui Pao revealed the purpose of his visit. He had tried his best to subdue Hu Yuzhen and came to Black Wind Monster Sect for this matter. After listening carefully, Lin Jin finally understood what was going on. Patriarch Shui Pao needed curator's help to move something from his hideout. It sounded simple, but even an idiot would know that it wasn't as easy as Patriarch Shui Pao made it sound. Move something? Who couldn't move something? Why did he have to ask curator for help? Besides, with Patriarch Shui Pao's skills, it wasn't difficult for him to create a clone. If it was something ordinary, he would have done it himself. Why would he need someone else's help? Everything else aside, if Patriarch Shui Pao could subdue Hu Yuzhen, he could control Hu Yuzhen or anyone else. Chapter 609. The ghost blood beast that tried to assassinate him at Tianxian City might even be related to Patriarch Shui Pao. In that case, there was a high chance that Patriarch Shui Pao knew the corpse cultivator as well. Why didn't he ask the corpse cultivator for help? The seemingly honest Patriarch Shui Pao was obviously hiding his true intentions. Lin Jin chuckled. However, Lin Jin didn't show it on his face. He merely chuckled and said, "Patriarch Shui Pao, if you don't tell the truth, I won't help you. I'll give you one last chance. If you don't speak now, I'll still have to destroy your divine will." Lin Jin couldn't possibly trust Patriarch Shui Pao, but he did want to know what the man was up to. If he could figure it out, it would be much easier to get rid of this guy in the future. Patriarch Shui Pao seemed hesitant. In the end, with an expression of desperation, he said, "Curator, you really can't blame me for hiding this. After all, my life is at stake. But since you want to know, I'll tell you. In fact, I was trying to escape back then. Since you're from a foreign land, you should know about immortal devouring beasts." Patriarch Shui Pao recounted his past. Back then, Patriarch Shui Pao was a unique blood demon from a foreign land. Later on, he was enlightened by Reverend Miaoyan of the Xian Dao Immortal Sect and started cultivating. Once his cultivation reached a certain level, he left the foreign land and arrived at the continents of Middle-earth. After that, he and a few demon brothers did something big. In fact, it was what the continents called the chaos of the five patriarchs. Patriarch Shui Pao was one of them. Later on, he was defeated by the human emperor. I don't know what method those human experts used, but they actually guided the human immortal energy into my brothers' bodies. In the end, they summoned the immortal devouring beast. My brothers were killed on the spot by the immortal devouring beast. Thankfully, I was lucky enough to utilize a secret technique to escape. After that, I hid deep underground, not daring to show my face again. At this, Patriarch Shui Pao wore a helpless expression. It didn't look like he was faking it. Regardless of whether Patriarch Shui Pao was telling the truth or not, Lin Jin still listened to him. It was a mixture of truth and falsehood. The general direction was correct, but there were some details that Patriarch Shui Pao left out. However, Lin Jin was no fool, so he asked, "I'll say it again. Patriarch Shui Pao, what do you want me to move? If you're not clear about it or you're hiding something, go find someone else. As for this divine sense of yours, I won't keep it." Patriarch Shui Pao hurriedly said, "Don't, curator. I'll speak, all right?" After pondering for a moment, Patriarch Shui Pao said, "It's just a corpse. If you help me move a corpse away, I will definitely repay your kindness." "What corpse?" Lin Jin was stunned as a strange thought popped into his mind. "All right, I won't hide it from you anymore. I'll tell you everything. It's an immortal's corpse. Back then, those human experts were sinister and vicious. They weren't a match for us five patriarchs in a head-on fight, so they resorted to underhanded means to plant immortal corpses into our bodies. That's how the immortal aura attracted the immortal devouring beasts to kill us." There was a hint of hatred in Patriarch Shui Pao's words. "To put it bluntly, because of that immortal's corpse, I haven't dared to come out all these years. Once I do, the immortal devouring beasts will surely attack me unless you help me move that corpse away." At this point, Lin Jin finally understood. After all, the human experts weren't immortals, so how could they fight the 5 patriarchs? So this was the method they used. Killing with a borrowed knife. Brilliant. After that, Patriarch Bloodcloak seemed to really be honest with Yang Qi. He told him many things, such as the fact that the immortal's corpse had been imbued with some sort of powerful restriction, making it impossible for him to get it out. Other mortals couldn't do it either. Only an expert who was close to an immortal could do it. Hence, based on this, it seemed logical that Patriarch Xue Pao would seek Curator's help. Lin Jin couldn't see any problems with it. However, Lin Jin knew that Patriarch Xue Pao was hiding something else. However, it seemed like he wouldn't be able to get anything out of him no matter how much he asked. He had no reason to suspect that Patriarch Xue Pao had already answered all his questions and his answers were reasonable. Apart from that, Patriarch Xue Pao also promised Lin Jin some benefit. It was hard to refuse. Lin Jin paced back and forth as if he was thinking and hesitating. Meanwhile, the fake Lin Jin in a corner glared at Patriarch Xue Pao. Everything was perfect. After waiting for a while, Lin Jin said, "Even if I want to help you, I need to know where it is." In other words, he was agreeing to help. Patriarch Xue Pao was overjoyed. He quickly said, "My real body is hiding somewhere in Grassy Continent. If Curator agrees, I can lead the way. Don't worry, Curator. Whether or not I succeed, I will give you the treasures I've kept for years as a token of my gratitude. I won't go back on my word." In fact, Lin Jin knew where Patriarch Xue Pao was hiding, but he wouldn't tell Patriarch Xue Pao. Just like how Patriarch Xue Pao must be hiding something from Lin Jin. "All right, I can try to help you, but I don't know if I'll succeed," Lin Jin agreed. "But we'll have to wait until tomorrow. There's been too many things to do today and I'm tired." Of course. Patriarch Xue Pao chuckled, musing that it was good that he agreed. "Patriarch Xue Pao, you're a guest from afar, so I can't just let you float around like this. Why don't you rest in this cave abode? I'll call for you tomorrow." Having said that, without waiting for a response, Lin Jin cast a spell and nailed Patriarch Xue Pao to the wall. With this, Patriarch Xue Pao couldn't move or leave. Having said that, Curator and the fake Lin Jin left together. After the duo left and there was no one else in the cave abode, Patriarch Xue Pao's expression turned menacing. But it was only for a fleeting moment before he closed his eyes and fell into a deep slumber. To the Black Wind Monster Sect, Curator was their signboard, their grandmaster. Of course, most of the time, people like him wouldn't be involved in the sect's construction. In other words, Curator didn't have to stay at Black Wind Monster Sect all the time. Forget Curator, even Lin Jin didn't need him. The sect's rules had been set. All the Monster Sect disciples had to do was follow them strictly. With the enforcement team and Taoist who watching over them, there wouldn't be any problems. After briefing Taoist who, the next day, Lin Jin, disguised as Curator, brought Patriarch Xue Pao's blood-red face to Grassy Continent and rode a cloud. Lin Jin's cloud-riding skill had now reached a higher level, especially after refining the 4 Seas Freedom Gourd. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it had reached the acme of perfection. Lin Jin was currently wearing Curator's mask, dressed in long robes that fluttered in the wind. The 4 Seas Freedom Gourd and breezy sword hung from his waist as he stood on top of a cloud with his hands behind his back. Clouds swirled beneath his feet, making him look like an immortal. Chapter 610. As for Patriarch Xue Pao's psyche, it was being controlled by the needles to guide the way. Both of them seemed to be chatting happily along the way, but in reality, they each had their own agendas. Patriarch Xue Pao, in particular, was clearly immobilized by the needles. Despite the excruciating pain, he had to feign a smile on his face. It was needless to say how aggrieved he was feeling. Just you wait. The first thing I'll do when I'm free is to destroy you. Patriarch Xue Pao was seething with hatred. However, he was also surprised because this was the first time he had met an expert who could easily hurt his psyche. Those needles were especially impressive for being able to pierce through his psyche. The cloud was traveling at an incredible speed, surpassing the speed of an average eagle. It would only take them a few hours to get to Grassy Continent. Lin Jin and Patriarch Xue Pao chatted along the way without any awkward silence. Half a day later, they arrived at Grassy Continent. Although it was a desolate place, it was much better than Liang Continent. Moments later, they arrived at a mountain range. There were no signs of human activity here. This was where Patriarch Xue Pao was hiding. Lin Jin scanned the area and was overwhelmed with emotions. This place was very similar to the one in Daolord's painting. The painting depicted this place where Daolord was supposed to kill Patriarch Xue Pao but was injured by a rank 9 immortal devouring beast instead. Due to the world created by Little Book Pavilion, Lin Jin had entered the corresponding world before. Hence, he was overwhelmed with emotions upon arriving here today. Curator, the hiding place of my true body is right below. Patriarch Xue Pao pointed downwards. All right. Lin Jin steered the cloud to descend quickly. Under normal circumstances, this place looked like a mountain range. It wouldn't be easy to find the entrance to Patriarch Xue Pao's lair. But with Patriarch Xue Pao around, this shouldn't be an issue. Along the way, Lin Jin found the entrance to a cave hidden away from the sun in the valley. This entrance looked ordinary and could only fit one person at most. But upon entering, it was a sight to behold. It turned out that there was a whole other world hidden inside. Lin Jin's brows furrowed as he stared at the complex underground cave that resembled an ant's nest. There were more than a dozen caves that could be seen at the moment, and after entering each cave there would definitely be more branches. From the looks of it, this place was simply a maze. More complicated than a maze. Moreover, Lin Jin wasn't lying when he said this was an ant nest. This was indeed a giant ant nest. Several large ant beasts were crawling in the darkness, waiting for an opportunity to strike. These ant beasts were a size larger than ordinary bulls. They should be some kind of rare exotic beast. Lin Jin found an opportunity to use his finger to appraise the ant. Underground Palace Ant Beast, 3rd rank, Earth attribute. Large in size, good at digging holes, low in intelligence, likes to live in group. There are 3 ways to advance, which are, after reading the museum's appraisal results, Lin Jin said to Patriarch Xue Pao's psyche, "You're quite capable to be able to control this nest of ants." Patriarch Xue Pao immediately said, "It's just a small trick. After all, I was the one who hid here first. If you think about it, these underground ant beasts are the outsiders. After a long time, they will get to know each other and be considered neighbors." Lin Jin could tell that Patriarch Xue Pao was being nonchalant. However, Lin Jin knew that while most of these ants were only rank 3, their combat strength was terrifying. Even rank 4 and rank 5 pet beasts wouldn't dare to provoke them. The reason was simple. These ants only moved underground and lived in group. If they were provoked, they would swarm up and fight with their numbers. Anyone would feel their scalp go numb when faced with hundreds or thousands of ants. Even a rank 4 pet beast would be surrounded and killed if they weren't careful. As long as it was an Earth Palace ant beast, it would definitely be controlled by an insect queen. According to Patriarch Xue Pao, the insect queen here was also a demonic beast. This place was truly a dragon's pool and tiger's den. Even if an expert were to find out where Patriarch Xue Pao was and ambush him, it would be extremely difficult. It might even be a one-way trip. Even an expert would not be able to withstand the onslaught of this nest of Earth Palace ant beast. "Curator, this way please." Patriarch Xue Pao led the way with his psyche, but didn't mention the ants again. But just because he didn't mention them didn't mean they didn't exist. Along the way, Lin Jin noticed that there were a lot of ants here. There were at least several hundred of them, and that didn't include the ones that were still in hiding. Under the mask, Lin Jin smirked. Patriarch Shuepao had made a good move. Although he didn't say anything and seemed nonchalant, he was actually trying to intimidate Lin Jin. Truth be told, Lin Jin would have been intimidated if this had happened in the past. After all, if he were to be surrounded by a swarm of ants underground, escaping would be as difficult as ascending to heaven. But things were different now. Putting aside his 2 rank 5 pet beasts, his 2 newly acquired treasures were enough to deal with most situations. One of them was the Divine Path Sword Scroll, an immortal sword, and the other was the 4 Seas Unfettered Gourd, a treasure that could create an ocean out of thin air. If Lin Jin was forced into a corner, he could just flood the ants' nest and drown them no matter how powerful they were. Hence, Lin Jin was confident. He wasn't afraid at all. Other than that, Lin Jin kept an eye out. After all, Patriarch Shuepao was an old demon that had lived for thousands of years. Did he really think that a nest of ants could scare Lin Jin? It might just be a smokescreen, Patriarch Shuepao must have something up his sleeve. With his guard up, Lin Jin continued moving forward. Twisting and turning, they walked through the incomparably complicated ant nest. Even with a photographic memory, they could not remember the route back and forth. After all, most of the forks were the same. This underground palace ant beast was an exotic beast with obsessive-compulsive disorder. It used sand, stones, and mucus to build the nest, and many places were carved from the same mold. This gave Lin Jin a headache. After all, he had no idea that there was such a large nest of ants here. Since he couldn't remember the route, there was nothing he could do. He could only deal with whatever came his way. At most, he would resort to other method. Like Heaven and Earth Inc., Lin Jin had plenty of trump cards anyway. Moments later, Lin Jin arrived at a large cave. This must be right below the ant nest. It was a natural cave with a large surface area. In front of him was the silhouette of a giant, leaning against the stone wall. Lin Jin took a closer look. Despite his vast experience, he was still shocked. Although the giant was sitting down, his size was astounding. Just his palms alone were bigger than an average person. When he stood up, he was at least 100 feet tall. Also, he was a fatty. Chapter 6:11. The giant was crimson in color and draped in a large crimson robe. It looked as if it was carved out of blood-colored amber. At the sight of this, Lin Jin's pupils dilated. He knew that this must be Patriarch Shuepao's true form. The color of blood was murky but transparent. Lin Jin could see a figure sitting cross-legged in the giant's chest. This figure seemed to be wearing a Taoist robe. His eyes were closed and he was probably dead. However, there was a faint trace of immortal energy emanating from him. At this, Lin Jin knew that what Patriarch Shuepao had said was true. For example, if an immortal's corpse was inserted into his body, if he didn't suppress it and hide, the immortal's energy would definitely leak out. When that happened, it would definitely provoke a rank 9 immortal devouring beast. It was no wonder Patriarch Shuepao dared not come out. Patriarch Shuepao's psyche floated up, trying to return to his body. However, Lin Jin forcefully pulled it back with his needle. "Curator, what are you doing?" Patriarch Shuepao was anxious. His psyche was precious, so he wanted to keep it safe as long as possible. Moreover, now that they were in Patriarch Shuepao's territory, this psyche was much more confident than before. "There's no rush. I still prefer you like this. If your psyche returns to your body, I won't be used to it." Lin Jin smiled, unconcerned. Having said that, he stepped forward and with a flick of his finger, a needle flew out and pierced into the blood giant's body. In an instant, Patriarch Shuepao's condition was recorded into the Museum of Deadly Beasts. Unlike a clone, this was the real body's information. Lin Jin mused, damn it. Just as he expected, Patriarch Shuepao was a rank 7 monster. Before this, Lin Jin had already deduced Patriarch Xue Pao's strength. After all, he was able to wreak havoc in the world back then, so his strength shouldn't be underestimated. Lin Jin had speculated that the man was at least rank 6 or above. Now, it seemed like his guess was right. How dangerous! Lin Jin glanced at the immortal's corpse that seemed to be embedded in Patriarch Xue Pao's body, musing, "Thank goodness this thing is suppressing it. Otherwise, if Patriarch Xue Pao were to show himself, there would probably be another bloodbath. In fact, almost no one in this world could match him. 1,000 years ago, there were still immortal corpses that could be used, but what about now?" Lin Jin pondered and made up his mind. No matter what, he couldn't bring out the immortal's corpse that was suppressing Patriarch Xue Pao's body. In fact, Lin Jin felt a great sense of danger when he read the museum's evaluation of Patriarch Xue Pao. Previously, when he encountered the 9th-tier immortal devouring beast, it was just a fleeting appearance. Moreover, he knew that as long as he did not become an immortal, he would not attract the immortal devouring beast. However, Patriarch Xue Pao was different. Now that the rank 7 monster was right in front of him, Lin Jin realized that his 2 pet beasts were only rank 5. They were clearly not enough. No, Xiaohua and the ghost blood beast must continue to evolve. They must reach rank 6 at least. Lin Jin gritted his teeth. However, he didn't have the time for that now. Fortunately, Lin Jin was wearing the curator's mask, so no one could see his current expression. This was the advantage of wearing a mask. To outsiders, he looked calm and unfathomable. "Curator, this is my body. You've seen the immortal's corpse for yourself. There's a seal on it that I can't break. I hope you can lend me a hand, Curator," Patriarch Xue Pao suddenly said. At the same time, the blood giant's palm opened up slightly and rays of golden light shone out. Patriarch Xue Pao was obviously hiding a powerful artifact in his palm. "If you can help me, I'll give this artifact to you, Curator." Patriarch Xue Pao threw out a bait. Lin Jin focused his gaze and saw a golden seal in Patriarch Xue Pao's palm. The seal was golden in color as if it was forged from gold. On top was a Qilin beast while below was a square seal. Everything else aside, just the vibrant colors on its surface was enough to tell that it was no ordinary item. This is the Qilin Mountain Suppression Seal. It was passed down from an ancient immortal and possesses extraordinary power. "Curator, you may take this as a token of appreciation." Patriarch Xue Pao looked pained as if this artifact was incredibly important. Lin Jin had only taken a glance at it when Patriarch Xue Pao's palm closed. It seemed like the treasure wasn't going to be shown to anyone easily. Admittedly, an immortal's artifact was indeed tempting. However, Lin Jin wasn't an inexperienced person. He already had 2, or rather, 3 artifacts in his possession. One was the immortal binding rope, the other was the 4 seas unfettered gourd, and the last was the breezy sword. Hence, Lin Jin wasn't particularly interested in the Qilin Mountain Suppression Seal. Moreover, Lin Jin was almost certain that even if he helped Patriarch Xue Pao move the immortal's corpse, the man wouldn't give it to him as he had promised. Moreover, Lin Jin had never intended to let Patriarch Xue Pao escape from this place. So what if he was a rank 7 monster? If he had the ability to come out, he would have turned the world upside down. So if Lin Jin didn't make a move now, when would he? Lin Jin flipped his palm over and several needles of different sizes appeared in his palm. One of them was the Thunderfire needle that Lin Jin had refined himself. Most of the artifacts Lin Jin had on him were obtained by chance. He didn't refine many of them himself, and the Thunderfire needle was one of them. It was the most powerful artifact Lin Jin had ever refined. Tempered by divine Thunderfire, its power was astounding. Now that Lin Jin had achieved some success in the body fortification and spirit refinement needle, using the Thunderfire needle was like adding wings to a tiger. Since the immortal's corpse inside the blood giant was the key, Lin Jin had to investigate it first. Lin Jin planned to use the Thunderfire needle to probe the corpse. With a flick of his finger, several needles including the Thunderfire needle flew out and pierced into the blood giant's body before approaching the immortal's corpse. Patriarch Xue Pao was also watching nervously, but there was a trace of inexplicable coldness in his eyes. Finally, when the needles came into contact with the immortal's corpse, Lin Jin's expression changed. "Curator, how is it?" Patriarch Xue Pao asked anxiously. Lin Jin fell into deep thought. After a moment, Lin Jin sighed and shook his head. "To tell you the truth, there's an extremely powerful seal on this immortal's corpse. Even I can't break it." At this, Patriarch Xue Pao was visibly disappointed. "Is there really nothing we can do?" Patriarch Xue Pao asked again. Lin Jin shook his head. "There's nothing we can do. This seal is vast and boundless. It's impossible to move the corpse with our strength." This time, Lin Jin was resolute. Patriarch Xue Pao fell silent. Obviously, this was definitely not good news for him. After a moment, Patriarch Xue Pao let out a long sigh. "This is fate. All right, I admit defeat." Having said that, he turned to the curator. But this time, Patriarch Xue Pao's eyes were no longer as polite and amiable as before. Instead, they were filled with malevolence. "Since you can't help, I won't keep you any longer." Just as he said that, something unexpected happened. A sharp aura descended from the sky, aiming for Lin Jin's head. At the same time, several withered arms suddenly reached out from the ground beneath Lin Jin's feet, grabbing onto his feet. In the blink of an eye, Lin Jin was in mortal danger. Chapter 612. Lin Jin didn't panic at all. In fact, he was already prepared for this. Patriarch Xue Pao had put on a good show earlier, but Lin Jin had never trusted him. Moreover, the breezy monster was the most sensitive to murderous auras. From the moment Lin Jin stepped foot into this place, the breezy monster had been warning him. Hence, Lin Jin waited patiently for the enemy to strike. Slash! Lin Jin only uttered one word before the breezy monster by his waist shot out like a beam of light. Two beams of light slashed down from above and below his feet. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Without moving, Lin Jin used the breeze monster sword to nullify the attack. Above him, a black shadow descended. It was a strange-looking ant beast. Its lower body was that of an insect while its upper body was that of a woman. However, the woman's expression was ferocious as she gritted her teeth. One of her insect limbs had been severed by the sword energy, and it was bleeding profusely. Below her feet, several zombies with severed limbs crawled out of the soil. Some of them were even severed at the waist by the sword energy. Even if they managed to crawl out, they would soon stop moving. Elsewhere, the corpse cultivator appeared with a dark expression. Behind him, a deathly aura billowed and the figure of a five-clawed zombie dragon swayed. At this, Lin Jin smirked. "I knew it." The corpse cultivator and Patriarch Xue Pao were in cahoots with each other. Lin Jin had guessed this back at Tianxian City and now, it was confirmed. As for that half-human, half-insect female demon beast, it was no surprise that she was the insect queen of the underground palace ant beasts. She was also Patriarch Xue Pao's helper. Lin Jin flicked his finger and shot a needle at the insect queen. However, the insect queen blocked it with her sturdy insect limbs and sneered in disdain. "Humph, child's play." In fact, Lin Jin wasn't thinking of using a single needle to hurt her. He was only trying to gauge the insect queen's strength. As expected, it's only a rank 5 monster. Although it's a rare beast, it can at most fight Xiaohua to a draw, Lin Jin calculated. Based on the current situation, the corpse cultivator and the insect queen seemed to have the upper hand. Not to mention, there was also Patriarch Xue Pao, who had an unknown amount of combat power. On the other hand, he was alone. No matter how he looked at it, he was at a disadvantage. "Curator, you didn't expect this, did you? Even if you have unparalleled powers, you won't be able to escape death today." the corpse Dao said with a hideous voice. The last time he was at Tianxian Royal City, he returned in failure. He had been suppressing his anger for a long time, and this time, he could finally release it. Killing the curator was now his primary goal. Then, the corpse Dao said to Patriarch Xuepao, Patriarch Xuepao, don't hide it anymore. This curator's cultivation base is very high. We need the three of us to work together. Otherwise, if we let him escape, there will be endless troubles in the future. In other words, he was telling Patriarch Xuepao that the curator already knew where he was hiding and that he had already fallen out with him. If he didn't make up his mind to eliminate him, the curator would definitely come back for revenge. So there was only one way to go. Corpse Dao, even if you didn't say that, I would have done the same thing. This curator is clearly not an immortal, but he's putting on an act. He thinks he can fool me. What a joke. Patriarch Xuepao sneered. Fresh blood gushed out of the blood giant's body and quickly gathered on Patriarch Xuepao's psyche. With a loud boom, an invisible malevolent aura erupted, forcing out the spirit-refining needle Lin Jin had buried. The next moment, the blood and psyche combined to form a new clone of Patriarch Xuepao. Its aura had surpassed that of the insect queen and the corpse Dao. It was now on par with the zombie dragon. Patriarch Xue's clone smirked. Curator, since you can't move the immortal's corpse, there's no point in keeping you around. Killing you and devouring your flesh and blood will at least strengthen me. Who knows, maybe after a few hundred years, I'll be able to break the immortal's seal. When that happens, I'll be free to roam the world. Patriarch Xuepao, don't waste your breath on him. Let's attack together and kill the curator to prevent any unforeseen circumstances, the corpse Dao said with a sinister smile. At the same time, a deathly fog began to spread behind him. The zombie dragon let out a roar, clearly agitated. Lin Jin remained calm. At this moment, Lin Jin was as calm as ever. He had no intention of escaping, as if everything was under his control. Corpse Dao, Patriarch Xuepao, do you really think you've won? Lin Jin's voice carried a hint of mockery and contempt. Isn't that the case? Forget about the fact that you're not an immortal. Even if you were, you'd still die if the three of us ganged up on you. We don't have that many people to help you this time. Dao Corpse had a confident look on his face. This time, they had meticulously planned everything out. Furthermore, it was a surprise attack. Even if the curator was on guard, he wouldn't have expected that there would be three experts ganging up on him. However, the curator's tone gave the corpse Dao an ominous feeling. It sounded like the curator wasn't afraid. In fact, he wasn't surprised to see the corpse Dao either. Could it be that the curator knew I would ambush him here? No, that's impossible. He can't possibly know. He must be bluffing. The corpse Dao calculated. Attack. The corpse Dao didn't plan to wait any longer. The zombie dragon behind him immediately swirled up a cloud of deathly fog and pounced forward with the force to engulf the world. At the same time, the queen insect's tail let out a strange noise. She was summoning the ant beasts. Instantly, the rumbling of an army could be heard. If there were thousands of ant beasts surrounding and attacking them, no matter who it was, they would have to suffer. Patriarch Xuepao made his move as well. However, a cloud of bloody fog erupted from his body. It instantly spread over 1,000 feet, forming a barrier that trapped everyone within. Inside the barrier, Patriarch Xuepao had more tricks up his sleeve. He was undefeatable. The surrounding ant beasts weren't in a hurry as they wouldn't be able to reach him anytime soon. However, the zombie dragon couldn't be ignored. Lin Jin immediately called out, "Breeze, come. Slay the dragon." In an instant, sword rays swirled like stars in the sky. Then, like the reflection of the moon on a river's surface, a cold glint flashed past. Following that, the ferocious and insufferably arrogant zombie dragon let out a pained wail before retreating hastily. In the blink of an eye, the victor had been decided. Dao Corpse's eyes widened in disbelief. After all, ever since he refined Dao Dragon's pet beast into a zombie dragon, this was the first time he encountered such a situation. In a direct confrontation, he was actually defeated in a head-on battle. Taking a closer look, there was a sword wound on the zombie dragon's neck. It was more than 10 feet long, and the wound was so deep that the bone could be seen. If it wasn't for the fact that the zombie dragon's skin was as tough as metal, its head would have long been chopped off by the sword. Even so, the zombie dragon was gravely injured. It would need to slowly heal its wounds with death energy, or else its combat strength would be greatly reduced. The zombie dragon was immediately put at a disadvantage against the breezy demon sword. Even Lin Jin was surprised by this. Chapter 6:13. Seems like studying the Divine Sword Scroll has greatly improved the breezy monster sword, Lin Jin mumbled to himself. This indirectly proved how powerful the Divine Path Sword Scroll was. However, back then, Lin Jin didn't know the wonders of this immortal-grade sword art. Even if he learned it, he could only scratch the surface. He couldn't even be considered a beginner. Only with the breezy monster sword was it truly useful. With a wave of his hand, there was a flash of light and a sword appeared in Lin Jin's hand. He sheathed it in an elegant manner, just like a sword immortal. The corpse cultivator was off to a bad start, but now that the ant beasts had gathered and Patriarch Xuepao's world of blood was completed, the real battle was about to begin. Curator, I will grind your bones to dust today. The Dao corpse was already mad with anger. At this moment, he felt lucky that he had made the right decision to team up with ancestor Xuepao to plot against the curator. Otherwise, if he was alone, there was no way he could be a match for the curator. In other words, the curator didn't even show his power in Tianxian Royal City. Or rather, the curator didn't even make a move himself. At this, the corpse cultivator was furious, but at the same time, he felt lucky. Just as he said, the curator was powerful, but no matter how powerful he was, he couldn't possibly withstand the combined attacks of the three of them, especially Patriarch Xuepao. While Patriarch Xuepao didn't dare to move recklessly due to the immortal's corpse, fearing that his aura would attract the immortal devouring beasts, his clone still had the strength of an immortal. Not to mention, while the underground ant queen wasn't strong, she had tens of thousands of ant soldiers. Their combined strength was enough to destroy everything. Hence, no matter what, the curator had to die today. Their surroundings were now dyed in the color of blood. This was the uniqueness of boundary spells. Lin Jin took a closer look and realized that the original cave was no longer there. It was as if he was in another world. Not only that, but ant beasts kept appearing, and there were now thousands of them. Everything else aside, these fearless ant beasts alone were troublesome enough to deal with. Sure enough, Patriarch Xuepao and the corpse cultivator were prepared. It seemed like they were determined to kill Lin Jin today. Undeniably, even if Lin Jin was an immortal, he was at an absolute disadvantage in this situation, even if he had many treasures. But he remained calm and collected, not panicking in the slightest. Because Lin Jin did have a trump card. It was at this moment that an ear-piercing eagle cry resounded. It seemed to descend from the heavens, penetrating through the rock layer of the mountain and breaking through the barrier of the blood world, allowing everyone to hear it extremely clearly. This eagle cry caused everyone's hearts to tremble, and the ones affected the most were the ant beasts. Under this might, they curled up on the ground and trembled. They're finally here. Lin Jin looked up and smiled. With a tap of his finger, a drop of Qianquan ink gushed out. Like a swirling vortex, a silhouette appeared. It was Daoist Tiger. Since Lin Jin knew that this would be a tough battle with Patriarch Xuepao, how could he not be prepared? Not only did he use the universe ink to stain Daoist Tiger's body so that he could teleport him over when needed, but he also pulled the golden-winged great demon over. The golden-winged monster was a bona fide rank 6 monster. His combat strength was so strong that even Lin Jin had to admit that he couldn't compare. With the golden-winged monster and Taoist whose help, no matter what tricks Patriarch Shui Pao had up his sleeves, Lin Jin could handle it. And now, it was time for a head-on confrontation. This place is too small. I can't unleash my full power here. Let's go somewhere else. Lin Jin had to break down the barrier of the blood world first. Otherwise, it would be troublesome. The method he used was simple. He opened the visitation hall's door, borrowed the museum's power, and unleashed a sky-piercing slash with the breeze monster sword to cut through the blood world. It wasn't just the blood world. Even the 1,000-foot-thick mountain above them was sliced open. With a loud rumble, a sword aura burst out from the ground. In an instant, boulders were sent flying and dust filled the air. The shock wave spread over a radius of at least 10 miles. Fortunately, there were no signs of humans within a few hundred miles. Otherwise, the earth-shattering commotion alone would have scared the living daylights out of them. Although there were no humans, there were beasts and birds. But at this moment, all the beasts and birds within 100 miles were panicking and fleeing for their lives. In an instant, birds covered the sky and hundreds of beasts fled for their lives. The mountain had completely collapsed. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the sky had collapsed and the earth had sunk in. An area of at least several thousand feet had collapsed, forming a gigantic pit. This was no longer damage that could be caused by a human. Using his supernatural powers, Lin Jin and Taoist, who had arrived outside the pit and were now standing on a boulder. Hovering in the sky was a giant golden-winged condor. When it spread its wings, they were at least 300 feet long. Each flap of its wings brought forth a strong gust of wind that swept through the forest. Many boulders were sent flying, and even trees that could be hugged by 2 people were uprooted. Lin Jin knew very well that his earlier slash shouldn't have been able to cause this much damage. The reason why the place collapsed to this extent was because the underground palace's anthill had collapsed along with it. Truth be told, the breeze monster sword's attack was terrifying, even breathtaking. Not only did it break through the blood world's barrier, but it had also pierced through the 1,000-foot rock layer and emerged from the mountain. Perhaps even an immortal wouldn't be able to do this, right? Lin Jin looked down at the breeze monster sword at his waist and shook his head. That attack earlier had consumed a lot of energy. The breeze monster sword wouldn't be able to be unsheathed for at least 2 to 4 hours. The blade spirit was now asleep, so he must have overexerted himself. I was too reckless, Lin Jin mumbled to himself. But if he had to do it again, he would do it again. Everything else aside, just the impact and effect alone was worth it. Fortunately, Lin Jin had plenty of trump cards up his sleeves. Even if he didn't use the breeze monster sword, he could still do it. Moreover, he had Taoist Hu and the golden-winged monster's help. On the other side, Taoist Corpse, the Ant Queen, and Blood Ancestor's clone flew out as well, looking rather pathetic. Just then, the Insect Queen let out a wail. Her underground palace's anthill had been completely destroyed, and the number of ant beasts that had perished beneath was uncountable. This was equivalent to flattening the Insect Queen's home. Anyone would be enraged by this. Of course, not all of the underground ant beasts had perished. There were always some that survived, but their numbers were less than 100. This amount of ant beasts could no longer pose a threat and was practically negligible. This was the result of the breeze monster sword's attack. Hence, the few hours that the monster sword was asleep was actually a win for them. Blood Ancestor's clone wore a menacing expression. What was supposed to be a good hand and a good situation had been turned around in an instant. No one would be able to accept this. However, Patriarch Shui Pao's physical body wouldn't suffer any damage. After all, he was a rank 7 demon. This small commotion probably wouldn't even leave a scratch on him. But this was a huge blow to his reputation. Scheming against someone else only to have the roof of his home flipped over. How embarrassing! Moreover, Lin Jin's attack earlier had truly frightened Patriarch Xuepao. Chapter 6:14. That attack was definitely worthy of being called an immortal's attack. In fact, it was even stronger than that. In Patriarch Xuepao's eyes, it even had the will of a true immortal. That was terrifying. He knew that immortals were divided into 3 realms. Leaving the pseudo-immortal realm aside, true immortals were the most common. Even if Patriarch Xuepao came out in his true form, he wouldn't dare to fight a true immortal. If he did, he would run as far away as he could. Due to this reason, Patriarch Xuepao was a little hesitant. But on second thought, he knew that Curator couldn't be a true immortal. If he was, forget the 3 of them, even a few more would be useless. Moreover, if he was a true immortal, once he revealed his aura, the immortal devouring beast would notice him. Back in the day, countless true immortals were killed by immortal devouring beasts. In terms of terror, immortal devouring beasts were the most terrifying. As long as he wasn't a true immortal, Patriarch Xuepao had seen the world. To him, while the situation was complicated, they could still fight. It was just that they didn't have the upper hand like before. Both sides were now in a stalemate. The aftershock of Lin Jin's attack had yet to dissipate, but neither side attacked immediately. Instead, they were observing. After all, Curator now had 2 more helpers. Both Patriarch Xuepao and Dao Corpse had to figure out the situation. The next moment, Dao Corpse got a clear look at Dao Tiger. His heart skipped a beat as he felt a little guilty. On the other side, Daoist Tiger had already revealed his round form. He was a 300-meter-tall tiger beast. However, this tiger beast was still mainly in human form. It was a half-human half-beast form that Daoist Tiger had specially cultivated. At this moment, Daoist who was staring at Daoist Corpse with anger in his eyes. Old Four, although you've changed your body, I can recognize that aura. Back then, the 6 of us helped each other and I've treated you well. Is this how you repay me? One could tell that Daoist who was extremely angry at this moment. Lin Jin could understand why Dao Tiger was angry. Back then, the 6 Paths Beast cultivators were fellow disciples of the Dao Lord. However, after the Dao Lord fell, the 6 Paths Beast cultivators started to stir up trouble. Among them, the most sinister and evil ones were the corpse cultivators. Among the 6 beasts, Daoist Dragon ranked first, Daoist Tiger ranked second, Daoist Crane ranked third, and Daoist Corpse ranked fourth. Who would have thought that right after the Dao Lord passed away, Dao Corpse would ambush Dao Dragon and Dao Tiger. One died and his pet beast was stolen while the other was gravely injured. He had to hide in Liangzhou to recuperate for 100 years. Daoist Tiger couldn't forget these hundreds of years of torture, so it would be strange if Daoist Tiger wasn't angry when he saw Daoist Corpse. Second brother, you're still alive, what a surprise. The corpse man's eyes froze. Although his tone was a bit teasing, he was already ready for battle. The others might not be Dao Tiger of, but of his Dao brother. Among the 6 Path Beastmen, Daoist Dragon was the eldest, but in terms of comprehension, cultivation, and battle prowess, Daoist Tiger was the strongest. In fact, Daoist Tiger's favorite disciple was also Daoist Tiger. After all, he had been raised from a young age, and their relationship was very deep. It was for this reason that Dao Corpse's jealousy toward Dao Tiger eventually turned into hatred. That was why he used a special spell to kill Daoist Tiger and refine him into a zombie. But even though he was fully prepared for a sneak attack, something still went wrong. Dao Tiger only escaped with heavy injuries. All these years, Dao Corpse had been searching everywhere but couldn't find him. To think that they would meet again under such circumstances. On second thought, Dao Corpse thought of something terrifying. Who on earth was this curator? He was even able to find the Taoist Tiger. When did they get together? Moreover, Corpse Dao was very clear about the injuries that Tiger Dao had suffered. After all, it was him who did it. Even if he didn't die back then, he would be slowly corroded by the corpse poison. First his body, then his soul, and eventually, he would become a zombie. But now, Tao Tiger was full of vigor. He didn't look injured at all. Obviously, Tao Tiger didn't have the ability to do this, so he must have gotten help from an outsider. Who? Was there even a need to ask? In the eyes of the Tao of Corpse, no one else in the world could have such supernatural powers and abilities other than the curator. Curator, you and I are irreconcilable. Tao Corpse gritted his teeth. But he didn't have the chance to fight the curator because Tao Tiger would be the first to come after him. Old four, on account that we're from the same sect, I'll give you a quick death today. Having said that, Tao Tiger saluted Lin Jin. Curator, I hope you won't stop me. I want to settle things with Tao Corpse. Knowing the grudge between Tao Tiger and Tao Corpse, Lin Jin didn't say much. He merely nodded and told Tao Corpse to be careful. To Lin Jin, although Tao Tiger had recovered from his injuries and his strength had improved, he was still lacking compared to Tao Corpse. This was mainly because Tao Corpse's zombie dragon was too terrifying. However, the zombie dragon had been severely injured after being slashed by Qingfeng's monster sword. So now, it seemed like they were evenly matched. With Tao Tiger's bravery, Lin Jin had a higher chance of winning. There was no need to stop him. Moreover, Lin Jin still had to deal with Patriarch Xuepao. At this moment, the hundreds of ant beasts that were lucky enough to survive crawled out of the huge pit and gathered around the insect queen. The insect queen had only lost one of its insect limbs, which was not a serious injury. Instead, it had retained much of its combat power. Suddenly, strong winds howled overhead as the golden-winged monster swooped down. With a swipe of his golden claws, several ant beasts were caught in the air and flung 1,000 feet up. If they were to fall just like that, the ant beasts would be smashed into meat paste. Curator, I'll deal with that bloody figure and these insects. You can just rest and supervise the battle, the golden-winged monster said. Rank 6 monsters were indeed domineering and powerful, which gave them the confidence to speak. Now, the golden-winged monster was planning to take on both the Blood Ancestors clone and the Insect Queen at the same time. After some thought, Lin Jin said, "Leave the Insect Queen to me. Please hold back the Blood Ancestors clone and don't let him cause trouble." As he understood the situation the best, Lin Jin knew that if the golden-winged monster were to take on 2 enemies at once, no matter how powerful he was at rank 6, he might not be able to gain the upper hand. This was mainly because the Blood Ancestors clone was so powerful that he could go toe-to-toe with the golden-winged monster. With this, Lin Jin had the golden-winged monster hold back the Blood Ancestors clone while he dealt with the Insect Queen. Now that they were outnumbered, he would have the upper hand. As the curator had saved his only son, the golden-winged monster wouldn't go against the curator's wishes. He pounced on the Blood Ancestors clone at once. Both sides were powerful, so they clashed immediately. The Insect Queen wanted to help, but Lin Jin was one step ahead of her and stopped her. The underground palace ant beasts can be considered to be rare and precious beasts, and they aren't the vicious and evil type. Why would they help the wicked commit evil? Chapter 6:15. Lin Jin wasn't speaking without thinking. There was a premise behind his question. During the battle earlier, Lin Jin had appraised this Insect Queen and discovered that there was a blood talisman inside her body. Lin Jin immediately guessed that Patriarch Xuepao must have used some underhanded method to gain control over this underground ant beast. He must have used threats and promises. If there was such a premise, Lin Jin's words were the start of something. If he could solve it with his mouth, why use his fists? Perhaps not only would he be able to easily defeat a powerful foe, but he could also rope him in to help him. Lin Jin wasn't going to let this opportunity slip by. Similarly, if things turned out as Lin Jin predicted, it would be a huge blow to Patriarch Xuepao. Sure enough, a hint of surprise appeared on the insect queen's coquettish face. Sometimes, words didn't even need to be spoken. Just one expression was enough to tell someone something. And now, Lin Jean was able to glean something from this expression. At once, Lin Jean said, using a blood talisman as a means of coercion and promises isn't a wise decision. Insect Queen, I'll help you remove the blood talisman today. You can choose what you want to do next. Lin Jean knew that even if he wanted to remove the blood talisman, it would be extremely difficult. Moreover, if Patriarch Shui Pao noticed it and tried to stop him, it would be even more difficult. Hence, he had to catch the other party off guard. Now that he had said what he needed to say and done what he needed to, it was now up to this insect queen to make her decision. Even if she was stubborn, or if Lin Jin's deduction was wrong, it didn't matter. With Lin Jin's current cultivation and skills, it wouldn't be difficult for him to eliminate this insect queen. It all depended on whether the insect queen was willing to let the needles enter her body. Lin Jin raised his hand and flicked his fingers. More than 10 needles flew toward the insect queen in an instant. Just as the insect queen was about to react, Lin Jin said, "Only by inserting needles into your body can you remove the blood talisman. Think carefully." His words caused the insect queen's movements to slow down by a beat. The next instant, all the needles pierced into the insect queen's body. With this, Lin Jin had the upper hand. After all, the insect queen wasn't strong enough, unlike Patriarch Shui Pao who could force the needles out of its body even if they were inserted. The insect queen was only a rank 5 monster, so it was almost impossible for it to force Lin Jin's needle out on its own. In other words, for a demonic beast at the level of the insect queen, once the spirit-refining needle entered its body, the final outcome would basically be decided. The insect queen seemed to have sensed the pressure too as she stood rooted to the spot. She glanced at Lin Jin before sneaking a glance at Blood Ancestor's clone. At that moment, the Blood Ancestor's clone and the Golden Wing Demon were locked in battle, so they had no time to care about anything else. Seeing this, Lin Jin felt even more confident. He immediately manipulated the needle to destroy the blood talisman Patriarch Shui Pao had left in the insect queen's body. This blood talisman only had magic power, but it could not be controlled by spiritual will, so it was relatively easier to deal with. After Lin Jin destroyed the blood talisman, Patriarch Shui Pao immediately sensed something and let out an angry roar. However, Lin Jin couldn't be bothered with him. The angrier Patriarch Shui Pao got, the better it was for Lin Jin. The insect mother immediately prostrated itself before Lin Jin. "Thank you, Curator, for saving my life." The insect mother was a monster that had cultivated for more than 100 years. With its high intelligence, most people would never be able to outsmart it. Meanwhile, Taoist Tiger and Taoist Corpse were engaged in a fierce battle. Both sides had a grudge against each other, so every time they made a move, they were aiming to take each other's lives. While the Golden Wing Demon and Patriarch Shui Pao were locked in a fierce battle, Lin Jin's side was quiet and peaceful. The insect mother was respectful, but Lin Jin couldn't possibly let his guard down. After all, he couldn't rule out the possibility that the insect mother and Patriarch Shui Pao were working together to put on a show. There was no harm in being more cautious. But in the end, Lin Jin was clearly overthinking things. The insect mother didn't launch a sneak attack. Instead, it remained respectful. It was obvious that it had been forced to serve Patriarch Shui Pao. "Curator, we, the underground ant beasts, have always stood aloof from worldly affairs. We choose our nests in deserted areas, but 100 years ago, we stumbled upon this place and were then controlled by Patriarch Shui Pao. Since then, we've been living a life worse than death. Now that we're free, I'm willing to lead the remaining ant beasts and follow you, Curator." Lin Jin was surprised by the insect mother's quick decision. But on second thought, it made sense. At a time like this, anyone with half a brain would know that they had to pick a side as soon as possible. In particular, The insect mother was already extremely dissatisfied with Patriarch Schwepao. After all, the man had controlled the underground ant tribe for over 100 years and had probably exploited and enslaved many times. Now that the shackles had been loosened, it was only natural for the insect mother to rebel. Moreover, the insect mother had heard of the great curator. Everything else aside, just the title of the world's strongest beast appraiser was enough to attract a monster like the insect mother. Even if it was for the sake of its own future, seeking refuge with the curator was definitely a wise move. Moreover, if it wanted to seek revenge on Patriarch Schwepao, relying on the insect mother and the less than 100 ant soldiers was a pipe dream. Hence, whether it was for survival or revenge, seeking refuge with the curator was the only option. Lin Jin nodded. The underground ant beasts were extremely rare even among rare beasts. If used wisely, the ant beasts could unleash terrifying power. However, it wasn't the right time to verify the insect mother's intentions. As long as it didn't get involved, everything would be fine. Lin Jin was confident in this. With the spirit refinement needle still inside the insect mother's body, if it had any ulterior motives, Lin Jin could kill it in an instant. After dealing with the insect mother's threat, Lin Jin turned to the fierce battle between the two sides. As expected of a rank 6 monster, the golden-winged monster was even stronger than Lin Jin. Against Patriarch Schwepao's clone, the golden-winged monster was able to suppress the latter and launch fierce attacks. On the other side, Daoist Hu and Daoist Corpse were also locked in a stalemate. However, Daoist Corpse had the upper hand here. After all, the other side had a zombie dragon. Strictly speaking, it was a 2-on-1 battle. Taoist Hu was in a perilous situation several times. Seeing this, Lin Jin decided to make his move first. Since he couldn't use the Breeze Monster Sword yet, Lin Jin summoned Xiaohuo with a wave of his hand. The rank 5 Firewolf was telepathically connected to Lin Jin. In its giant wolf form, it pounced at the zombie dragon to entangle it. With this, Taoist Hu could fight Corpse Taoist 1-on-1 and settle this grudge once and for all. At this moment, Dao Corpse was also a bit anxious. Taoist Hu was adept at using the Dark Wind spell. The strong winds around him were intimidating, but it was the perfect counter to his deathly aura. Although the aura was strong, it couldn't get close to him. Just as it got close, it would be blown away by the dark wind. Previously, with the zombie dragon's assistance, Corpse Taoist had the upper hand. But now that Xiaohuo was holding the zombie dragon back, Corpse Taoist was forced into a passive position. Chapter 6:16. In a 1-on-1 fight, Corpse Dao was no match for Dao Hu. After all, Corpse Dao was using someone else's corpse while his own body was still trapped in the painting realm. Moments later, Corpse Dao's body was so badly injured that his bones could be seen. One of his arms was missing as Dao Hu had ripped it off and crushed it with a spell. Run! Corpse Dao knew he was no match for Dao Hu. Now that his body was severely damaged, if he didn't leave now, he might not be able to escape even if he wanted to. In a situation like this, he couldn't even take care of himself, so he obviously didn't care if Patriarch Schwepao was dead or alive. An aura of death spread out from behind Corpse Dao. The latter immediately tried to escape, but Dao Hu was already prepared for this. The moment he saw Corpse Dao retreating, he roared and leaped up. With a swipe of his tiger claws, a visible gust of wind whizzed out, blocking Corpse Dao's path. Wherever the gust of wind passed, rocks crumbled as if they were being chopped by an axe. Corpse Dao hesitated for a moment before he was caught up. Helpless, he could only fight Dao Hu again. There were a few times when Corpse Dao tried to summon the zombie dragon, but Xiaohua kept him busy. Besides that, Lin Jin also made a move. Using the 4 Seas Freedom Gourd to whip up huge waves, he managed to wash away the zombie dragon that tried to come over. Under the combined attack of water and fire, the zombie dragon couldn't even get close, let alone help. Corpse Dao grew increasingly anxious at this. Second brother, are you really going to disregard our brotherhood and be so ruthless? Corpse Dao was desperate, so he spoke up. He was begging for mercy. Corpse Dao's body was covered in claw marks so deep that bones could be seen. If he was a normal person, even an immortal would die. At the very least, he would bleed to death. However, a zombie's body was similar to an immortal body, so even if his organs were spilling out, Corpse Dao still didn't show any signs of dying. Fourth brother, did you ever care about brotherhood back then? Daoist, whose words had directly killed Daoist Corp. What Daoist Corpse had done in the past was indeed not a matter of friendship. It was not an exaggeration to say that he had betrayed Daoist Corpse. However, Daoist Corpse was only stalling for time. He found an opportunity and suddenly cast a technique. His body instantly changed, turning into a ferocious-looking corpse ghost with a mouth full of sharp teeth. His neck could actually twist and lengthen. He turned his head around, opened his mouth, and bit Daoist Tiger's chest. The sharp fangs carried a terrifying corpse aura as they pierced through the flesh. Tiger Priest screamed out in pain, followed by Corpse Priest's creepy laughter, which seemed especially creepy and scary. Even Lin Jin was caught off guard by this turn of events. Who would have thought that the Corpse Cultivator had this trick up his sleeves? The Corpse Cultivator's form was truly terrifying. His body could contort at will, and the Corpse Cultivator now looked more like a ghost than a corpse. Having been bitten, Daoist who didn't seem to be in a good state. Even an idiot would know that this bite from Corpse Priest was no joke. Lin Jin panicked and immediately flew over. Daoist who let out a roar and opened his mouth wide. Daoist whose face began to protrude as fangs emerged from his mouth. Then, he lowered his head and bit down. A tiger's greatest trump card was obviously their bite. This was Daoist whose first time using this skill in his original form. This bite was enough to change the world. Half of Corpse Dao's body was gone. Half of it was bitten by Daoist who, even with an immortal body like Corpse Dao, he wouldn't be able to survive after half of his body was bitten off. Moreover, Daoist who swallowed the corpse's flesh and followed up with a second bite. With this second bite, Corpse Dao's head and body were gone. All that was left was one arm and two legs which fell to the ground with a thud, emitting a rotting corpse aura. Lin Jin gaped at the sight. Everything happened so suddenly that Lin Jin didn't even have time to react. Who would have thought that Daoist who would open his mouth and swallow Corpse Dao in a moment of desperation? A thought popped into Lin Jin's mind. Didn't Daoist who find it disgusting? Wouldn't Corpse Dao suffer from diarrhea if he ate it? As the thought flashed through his mind, Lin Jin hurried over, afraid that something might happen. Daoist who stood proudly. With his massive size, he looked like a god of war, striking fear into the hearts of others. The wound on his chest exuded a black aura, but Lin Jin could tell that it was nothing serious. Lin Jin felt that the real problem was the piece of flesh he had just swallowed. Lin Jin approached and studied the man from head to toe. He didn't know what to say. Suddenly, a black aura began to emit from Daoist whose body. Within it was traces of a deathly aura. Startled, Lin Jin hurriedly shot out more than 10 spirit refinement needles. In an instant, Lin Jin had a general idea of Daoist whose condition. What a domineering corpse aura! Lin Jin frowned. This situation was beyond his expectations. Daoist who swallowing Corpse Dao in 2 mouthfuls was out of desperation, but it was within reason. After all, Corpse Dao was a type of zombie and zombies were indestructible. Just like the one sealed in the painting world, even Lin Jin and Xu Xiaolu had no choice but to seal it away. Hence, the difficulty of completely eliminating Corpse Dao was unimaginable. Other than his master, Daoist, who, the person who understood Corpse Dao the most in this world, was probably Daoist who. Hence, Daoist, who actually had a way to eliminate Corpse Dao. And that was to devour and refine it. To put it bluntly, Taoist who didn't decide to devour corpse Tao on the spur of the moment, nor was he forced to do so. It was all part of his plan. However, it wouldn't be easy to completely refine corpse Tao after devouring him. Right now, Taoist who was fighting against corpse Tao's corpse aura. It all depended on who was stronger and who could last longer. The one who could last till the end would be the winner. If Taoist who won, the corpse aura would be completely refined and corpse Tao would be considered dead. From then on, this abnormal creature would cease to exist. But if corpse Tao won, the situation would be much more troublesome. Corpse aura would completely corrode and assimilate Taoist who. In the end, Taoist who would turn into a zombie tiger beast, while corpse Tao would gain new life in this body. Upon learning this, Lin Jin was overwhelmed with emotions. He mused, "This corpse Tao is amazing. To think that he managed to come up with such a terrifying cultivation method. It's even harder to deal with than dog skin plaster." From a certain perspective, corpse Tao's corpse Tao cultivation method was the true secret of immortality. As long as no accidents happened, corpse Tao could continuously infect and assimilate other living beings through corpse aura to achieve rebirth. This was true indestructibility. However, to Lin Jin, this sort of survival was no different from death. Without senses and emotions, how different was he from a walking corpse? Living like this, he might as well be dead. Looking at the current situation, Taoist Tiger seemed to be having a hard time. Perhaps he had underestimated the corpse chi of Taoist corpse. At this moment they were in a stalemate. However, it could be seen that without external help, the possibility of Taoist Tiger losing would be much higher. Of course, Lin Jin couldn't just watch Taoist who turn into a zombie. Invoking a spell, he used the spirit refining needle to help Taoist who refine the corpse aura. Corpse aura rampaged through Taoist whose body like a herd of wild horses that had escaped their reins, galloping recklessly. Chapter 6:17. Ever since he started cultivating, Lin Jin had seen and heard far more than anyone else. Even a monster like Taoist, who had lived for centuries, might not be as knowledgeable as Lin Jin. The corpse energy in Taoist whose body was clearly unusual. It was too strong. It didn't feel like the aura of a dying man. In an instant, a thought popped into Lin Jin's mind. Was Taoist who doing this on purpose to lure Taoist who into devouring him? After all, Taoist who and Taoist who used to be brothers from the same sect. They should be familiar with each other's supernatural powers and spells. Of course, Taoist who was an exception. He must be hiding something, but he must know Taoist who well. Just like Taoist whose ability to devour foreign objects and refine them into his body, Taoist who should know about it too. Perhaps Taoist who knew he had no chance of winning, so he intentionally lured Taoist who into devouring him. As the saying went, retreat in order to advance. Then, Taoist who used the powerful corpse energy to refine Taoist who from the inside. These were all possibilities that Lin Jin suddenly thought of. Now, it didn't seem impossible. After all, the corpse energy in Taoist whose body was too strong. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that if Taoist who were to rely on himself, it would be extremely difficult to defend against this corpse energy. He probably wouldn't be able to. However, if this was Taoist whose scheme, then he must have made a mistake despite his meticulous planning. He didn't expect Lin Jin to be involved. Or rather, Curator didn't know how powerful the body-casting needle was. This was where Taoist who had made a mistake. Lin Jin stabbed the thunderfire needle into Taoist whose body as well. Together, they surrounded and suppressed the rampaging corpse energy. Under the effect of the needle, the corpse energy was gradually forced into Taoist whose right arm. Like an army being surrounded, Taoist who was forced to retreat as he fought. However, he was helpless against a stronger enemy and could only keep retreating. Lin Jin could feel the unwillingness of this corpse energy, as well as anger and fear. Sure enough, Lin Jin could tell that this corpse energy was most likely done by Taoist who on purpose. Taoist who was strong to begin with and his internal cultivation technique was brilliant. However, Taoist whose hiding spot was extremely dangerous. No matter how powerful Taoist whose internal cultivation technique was, it was useless as Lin Jin could easily suppress the corpse energy. However, with the addition of the body-forging spirit refining needle, things would be different. Under the spirit refining needle, the corpse energy was constantly being suppressed and pushed back. Taoist who clearly noticed this, so he was naturally happy to have such reinforcements. He used the internal refining technique along with the spirit refining needle to chase the corpse energy into his right arm. Corpse chi was terrifying, and there was no way to refine or eliminate it, only drive it away. Of course, this kind of terrifying corpse chi couldn't be left in a few important organs. The 5 viscera and 6 bowels couldn't contain it. Otherwise, it would be a slow-acting poison to the Tao of Tiger. Sooner or later, they would be corroded by the corpse chi. The head was even worse, so it could only be the limbs, which were relatively less lethal. Lin Jin's plan was to force all the zombie energy into his right arm and then think of a way to force it out of his body in one go. After all, since it was difficult to refine, he could only force it out. At that time, when the corpse chi came out of his body, he would directly burn it with a mouthful of dragon fire. Perhaps the corpse energy was very clear about this. Once it was forced out of Taoist whose body, only death awaited it, so it was extremely tenacious. No matter how the spirit refining needle forced it, no matter how Taoist who circulated his chi, the corpse energy refused to leave. For a moment there was a stalemate. Taoist whose right arm was now covered in a black aura as if it had been painted with a layer of black dye. The muscles on it were knotted as if countless worms were crawling around. Lin Jin frowned. This wasn't looking good. This corpse energy was too difficult to deal with, and Taoist who could tell that too. The burly man gritted his teeth and said, "Curator, chop off my right arm." Taoist who had to chop off his arm to survive, or rather, to kill the corpse cultivator. This was the only way. Chop off my right arm and burn it. Taoist whose eyes glinted fiercely. He clearly knew that this corpse energy had to be eradicated or else there would be endless repercussions. If he couldn't get rid of it, it would eventually corrode his body. Since he couldn't force the corpse energy out, he could only chop off his arm. There was no other way. Lin Jin told Taoist who to calm down. The golden-winged monster could keep the Blood Ancestors clone busy, so they didn't have to worry too much. At least, this gave Lin Jin some time to come up with a plan. Chopping off his arm and burning it with a specialized spell could indeed get rid of this corpse energy. Once the corpse energy was gone, the corpse cultivator would no longer exist. This was the safest method and it seemed to be the only one. However, Lin Jin felt that Taoist whose arm would never be recovered. Moreover, most of Taoist whose blood energy was concentrated in his right arm. If he chopped it off, he would lose 100 years of cultivation. He would save it if he could. Just then, Lin Jin thought of something. Since the spirit refinement needle was imbued with fire energy, it could easily repel the corpse energy. Since that was the case, why couldn't he use the needle to set up a barrier to keep the corpse energy off his right arm forever? It wasn't a difficult task. At this thought, Lin Jin immediately manipulated the spirit refinement needle to seal off Taoist whose right arm completely. With this, the corpse energy would have no way out. This wasn't enough. While he had to seal off the corpse energy, he couldn't let it continue corroding his right arm. At the very least, Taoist who had to retain control of this arm. Lin Jin immediately took out some materials and spewed dragon fire on them to refine them. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Lin Jin's dragon fire was now at its peak. Once the flames passed, all the materials turned into a suspended liquid. Lin Jin smeared the liquid on the needles and used the 100-needle technique to refine the meridians in Taoist Hu's right arm. This was the essence of the cast spirit refinement needle. Not only could it be mended, but it could also be reforged out of thin air. Once this unique fire vein appeared, the pitch-black right arm began to glow with a faint, fiery light. At first, it was only faintly discernible, but soon, it was clear enough to make his entire arm feel scorching hot. Taoist Hu was dumbfounded. In fact, when Lin Jin sealed off his right arm, Taoist Hu couldn't feel his right arm anymore. It was only after Lin Jin reforged the fire meridians that Taoist Hu could feel his right arm again. But this time it felt very strange. Although Taoist Hu could control this arm, he couldn't feel any other sensations, such as pain. Taoist Hu clenched his right fist, and a ghastly aura of death emanated from it. What a powerful force! Taoist Hu was startled. At the same time, the fire vein in his right arm glowed brightly and Lin Jin could faintly hear Taoist Hu's wails. Then, Taoist Hu had an idea. He raised his right hand and struck with his claws. A mountain 1,000 feet away crumbled at the sound. Not only that, the zombie dragon that had been fighting with Xiao Hua stopped as well. As if waiting for a command, its massive body slithered over to Taoist Hu's side. Taoist Hu and Lin Jin were both startled. But soon, they realized that the zombie dragon had lost its initial murderous intent. It seemed like it had recognized Taoist Hu as its master. Lin Jin immediately used his needle for beast evaluation. Sure enough, the results of the zombie dragon's appraisal were slightly different. The owner of the blood contract had become Taoist Hu. Chapter 6:18. The zombie energy was sealed and the situation was now balanced. Moreover, Taoist Hu could now control his right arm that was filled with zombie energy. Not only that, but with the zombie energy in his right arm, the power it contained was more than 10 times stronger than before. In other words, Taoist Hu had hit the jackpot this time. He might have lost an arm, but this time, it was a blessing in disguise. Not only did he keep his right arm, but he also gained a zombie dragon as a pet beast. Taoist Hu was clearly dumbfounded. Fortunately, Taoist Hu reacted quickly. He knew better than anyone that if he was the only one who encountered this today, he wouldn't be able to keep his arm even if he could shrink it. Moreover, no one could tell what would happen to the zombie energy that devoured his arm. Perhaps the zombie would be reborn. Judging from the current situation, it was not impossible. How strange the cultivation method of the corpse cultivators was, it was obvious to all. Moreover, the corpse cultivators could change their bodies at will. As long as it was a zombie's body, the zombie could be reborn on it. Now, by sealing the spirit corpse power of the corpse Tao, to a certain degree, this almost immortal thing was completely sealed. From now on, the corpse Tao would no longer be a threat, because it would never be able to escape from Tiger Taoist's right arm. Therefore, it would be enslaved and become a part of Tiger Taoist's fighting power. Looking at it this way, it was truly amazing to be able to do this. It could even be considered a godlike feat. Hence, Taoist Hu immediately bowed at the curator after coming to his senses. "Thank you for your help, curator." Taoist Hu had attacked the zombie out of revenge, and to help Taoist Lord clean up the mess, so it was fine for him to say so. Lin Jin waved his hand. "This corpse cultivator has gone against me several times. Killing him is beneficial to me. As for the rest, I've only done what I can." He said it casually without claiming credit. Taoist Hu was even more impressed. Today's incident was all thanks to the curator's careful planning, secretly informing him and the golden-winged monster, allowing him to exact his revenge. With the zombie gone, he could only be trapped in Taoist Hu's right arm, under his control. It was a fate worse than death. The insect queen had already submitted to the curator, so all that was left was Patriarch Xuepao. On the other side, the golden-winged monster and blood ancestors clone were locked in a fierce battle. This was a battle of immortals. In all fairness, if Lin Jin didn't use some powerful artifacts, he wouldn't be able to interfere in a battle of this level. Curator, should we go over and help? Because of his right arm, Taoist whose strength had increased greatly. That was why he was full of confidence and wanted to show off his skills. Lin Jin, on the other hand, shook his head. That's just Patriarch Xue Pao's clone. Even if it's destroyed, it won't affect anything. The real key lies below. Lin Jin pointed to his feet. Patriarch Xue Pao's main body was right below. Taoist Tiger nodded. Because he had experience dealing with Taoist corpse, whatever the curator said was the truth. He hurriedly said, "What should we do next? Please tell us, curator." And that was to listen to Lin Jin's instructions no matter what. The golden-winged monster had no problem keeping the Blood Ancestors clone occupied. With a tap of his finger, Lin Jin's cosmos ink spread from his fingertip as if a black door had been opened. "Let's go." Lin Jin beckoned and led the way in. Without a word, Taoist who followed closely behind. With a flash of black light, both of them were back underground. Lin Jin's previous slash through the Earth's crust and the mountain range was indeed powerful. Although he managed to destroy the underground anthill, only half of Patriarch Xue Pao's main body's hiding place had collapsed. Lin Jin had planned this beforehand, so he left a drop of cosmos ink here. Sure enough, it came in handy now. Not far ahead was Patriarch Xue Pao's main body, the fat blood giant. As he approached, Lin Jin noticed countless blood vessels seeping through the walls above his feet. They looked crystal clear, as if they were hiding a red crystal vein. This must have been used to stabilize the cave. Despite the severe collapse earlier, this half of the cave was still intact. Just this fact alone showed how sturdy the cave was. And the more it was like this, the more it showed how much importance Patriarch Xue Pao placed on this main body. Lin Jin continued approaching, while Taoist, who followed behind him respectfully. At the same time, he scanned his surroundings in case something happened. When Lin Jin was less than 30 feet away, a pool of blood pooled on the ground before him. Then, a human figure made entirely out of blood appeared. "Curator, why must we fight to the death? Why don't we just stop here?" the figure said. This was clearly another of Patriarch Xue Pao's psyche clones. This Patriarch Xue Pao has amazing powers. He can actually control multiple clones at the same time? Taoist who was amazed. He had cultivated this cloning technique before and his level wasn't too bad. However, even someone like Taoist who could only control one clone at a time. After all, it was extremely taxing on one's mind. If one's psyche wasn't strong enough, they wouldn't be able to control two clones at the same time. But Patriarch Xue Pao could. Lin Jin said nothing. He wasn't surprised. After all, Patriarch Xue Pao was a rank 7 monster who had been cultivating for thousands of years. It was only natural for him to have some extraordinary abilities. After all, the man had been trapped here for more than 1,000 years. He couldn't have been idling away for so long. He must have been cultivating. Lin Jin continued forward while saying, "Why didn't you say that when you guys had the upper hand earlier?" This time, the blood-colored figure panicked a little. There was an angry roar from above, followed by the golden-winged monster's screech. Both sides were clearly fighting fiercely. Without a doubt, Patriarch Xue Pao's powerful clone wouldn't be able to come to their rescue. "Curator, I know many secrets and I can tell you all of them. Moreover, it was the corpse cultivator who wanted to deal with you. Now that he's dead, I, Patriarch Xue Pao, won't go against you anymore. There's no deep grudge between us, so why must we fight to the death?" Patriarch Xue Pao tried to reason with Lin Jin. Unfortunately, Lin Jin wasn't in the mood to talk about it now. By now, Lin Jin had already placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. He looked like he was about to draw his sword at the slightest provocation. Patriarch Xue Pao had witnessed the power Lin Jin displayed when he drew his sword. If his real body were to take that attack, he would be in trouble. Everything else aside, if his real body was cut open and he accidentally released an immortal's aura, the immortal devouring beast would immediately come and kill him. After all, the immortal's body that was sealed inside his body couldn't be forced out. Curator, I can teach you the great sanguine ray. After cultivating it, you'll obtain a supernatural power that will allow your physical body to enter an almost immortal state. I can also hand over all the forces I've been cultivating all these years to you. From now on, you'll be the most powerful person in this world. Some countries' emperors will even have to be conferred titles by you. If you don't agree, they won't be able to become your royal brother. Patriarch Shui Pao continued to tempt Lin Jin. I also know the truth behind the fall of immortals and the origin of that immortal devouring beast, Patriarch Shui Pao said anxiously. Just then, the curator stopped in front of him. Chapter 6:19. Seeing the curator stop, Patriarch Shui Pao breathed a sigh of relief. Patriarch Shui Pao was genuinely afraid. With the corpse, the insect queen, and several thousand rank 3 ant beasts, it shouldn't have been a problem to plot against the curator. But who knew that not only was the curator prepared, but he had also come up with a counterattack. Not only did he break the blood talisman in the insect queen's body, but he also killed the corpse. Now that it was 3 against 1, unless Patriarch Shui Pao used his physical strength, he could only wait for death. If he used his physical strength, he would have to release the immortal's aura from the immortal's corpse. If that happened, only death awaited the immortal devouring beast. Therefore, thinking of a way to compromise was the best path at the moment. Even surrendering and admitting defeat was not a big deal. Having dominated the world for thousands of years, Patriarch Shui Pao had no problem adapting to circumstances. Lin Jin wasn't interested in anything but that immortal devouring beast. Since Patriarch Shui Pao knew about this beast, Lin Jin really wanted to hear about it. Tell me about the immortal devouring beast, Lin Jin asked. Patriarch Shui Pao quickly said, If I tell you everything I know, will the curator be lenient and we'll mind our own business from now on? How about that? Sure, Lin Jin agreed without hesitation. Patriarch Shui Pao didn't fully trust him, but at least he had a guarantee. Moreover, if the curator went back on his word, Patriarch Shui Pao wouldn't just wait for his death. He would use a spell to trap the enemy. Once the immortal devouring beast descended, the curator and the others would be dragged in as well. In other words, if they had to die together. This was Patriarch Shui Pao's plan. If he was forced into a corner, he could use this method to threaten the curator. In short, Patriarch Shui Pao believed that he hadn't played all his cards yet. It was best not to fall out with the curator if possible. Next, Patriarch Shui Pao used a spell to condense sand and stones to create a table and 2 stools. He then invited the curator to take a seat. After all, it was better to sit down and talk than to be at loggerheads. To put it bluntly, Patriarch Shui Pao really didn't want to go all out. If there was a chance, he would grab it. Lin Jin didn't argue and sat down. Patriarch Shui Pao then used his blood-colored silhouette to transform into an elderly man in brocade robes. He sat opposite Lin Jin with an amiable smile on his face. In his original form, Taoist Tiger stood behind Lin Jin. Ancestor Shui Pao glanced at Taoist Hu and chuckled, 6 Paths Beast, we've met before. Back then, I also knew your master, and our relationship was pretty good. It had to be said that those who had lived for a long time were thick-skinned. Patriarch Shui Pao had perfectly interpreted this saying. In any case, Lin Jin knew that Daolord and Patriarch Shui Pao were enemies back then, not friends. Otherwise, Daolord wouldn't have accidentally revealed his immortal aura in order to eliminate Patriarch Shui Pao, causing the rank 9 immortal devouring beast to attack him. However, there was no need to talk about this matter, and there was no need to embarrass Patriarch Shui Pao. Following that, Patriarch Shui Pao began his explanation. Back then, when the immortal Tao was at its peak, Patriarch Xue Pao was but a fledgling demon cultivator who hid in the mountains to cultivate. Back then, any immortal could have crushed a little demon beast like him to death. It was like killing an ant. Back then, the path of immortals reigned supreme. Monsters, could only kneel before immortals to survive. Patriarch Xue Pao's tone was laced with an inexplicable emotion. Perhaps only humans or monsters who had lived through that era could understand it. Lin Jin didn't experience it and he couldn't be bothered to. Get to the point. All right. Patriarch Xue Pao quickly stopped reminiscing. Perhaps it was because the path of immortals was too prosperous. When things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. In the realm of 9 heavens, the immortals were so full of themselves that they thought they were comparable to the heavenly Tao. They even thought they could surpass the heavenly Tao and mete out punishment on behalf of the heavens. And above the 9 heavens there was a hanging mountain. At the peak of that mountain there was a stone plate. Legend has it that it was the origin of the world, the heavenly Tao's cornerstone. It was said that if one could refine the heavenly Tao stone plate, one could replace it and become the master of the heavenly Tao, achieving immortality. Someone must have deliberately spread this rumor, but who knew that the immortal emperor would actually believe it? He led the immortals up the mountain, wanting to refine the heavenly Tao stone plate himself, At this, Patriarch Xue Pao couldn't stop laughing. How foolish! Back then, none of the immortals tried to stop him. After all, since ancient times, people have worshipped the heavenly Tao stone plate with utmost respect after becoming immortals. That immortal emperor was so arrogant that he tried to replace the heavenly Tao. In the end, he made a grave mistake. At this, Lin Jin shuddered in fear. He understood now. The reason people could become immortals was probably related to the heavenly Tao stone plate at the peak of the 9 heavens hanging mountain. It was like a starving dog being adopted by a person who fed it and taught it many skills. But in the end, the dog thought that it was stronger than the person and wanted to replace it. That was pretty much what it meant. Back then, the immortals were just like that. Arrogant and conceited. Just like that dog, it wanted to bite its master. In the end, it would only bring about its own destruction. Back then, heaven and earth changed. The heavenly Tao stone plate emitted boundless lightning, instantly killing the immortal emperor and thousands of immortals. Don't you think this is retribution? There were thousands of true immortals, and many of them were even carefree immortals with as long lifespans as the heavens themselves. In the end, they were all reduced to ashes. Just thinking about it was enough to tell how terrifying that scene was. Thousands of top-notch immortals were instantly killed by a single bolt of lightning. Just how terrifying was that lightning? After that, I heard that there was a beast's roar in the depths of Hanging Mountain and immortal devouring beasts appeared. Just like that, the path of immortals began to decline. As long as one was an immortal, they couldn't escape the immortal devouring beasts' attacks. Many monster cultivators were fine, but the group of immortals knew that their days were numbered, so they went around killing monster cultivators. Luckily, I was just a small monster hiding in a cave, so I was able to escape. Patriarch Xue Pao continued. There were a few immortal sects that escaped into the outer realms and relied on the miasma to avoid the immortal devouring beasts' attack. But in my opinion, they were merely struggling at death's door. After a pause, Patriarch Xue Pao seemed to recall something. There's one more thing. It's said that the immortal emperor's cultivation was extremely high, so he didn't die immediately after being struck by the lightning. Instead, he fought back and even shattered a corner of the heavenly Tao stone plate. But the immortal emperor still died in the end. That corner, on the other hand, fell from the 9 heavens and disappeared. But this is just a rumor, so don't take it seriously. In short, they reaped what they sowed. Those immortals were courting death, but in the end, I didn't dare to show my face. Patriarch Xue Pao's last sentence was filled with resentment. Clearly, it was because of the immortal corpse in his body. If it wasn't for that thing, he would definitely be able to dominate the world. He wouldn't have to hide here like a turtle, not even daring to show his strength. Chapter 620. Lin Jin kept his word and didn't continue to make things difficult for Patriarch Xue Pao. From this encounter, Lin Jin could tell that Patriarch Xue Pao wasn't at the end of his tether. From the fact that he could summon a second clone and cast a spell that allowed him to casually land on the stone table, Lin Jin could tell that Patriarch Xue Pao still had some strength left. With this, Patriarch Xue Pao wouldn't be easy to deal with. If he was forced into a corner, the man might just try to take him down with him. That would be troublesome and no one would benefit from it. Since Lin Jin couldn't completely crush Patriarch Xue Pao and the man wanted to keep the peace, there was no need for Lin Jin to fight him to the death. However, leaving just like that wasn't an option either. Lin Jin had purposely stalled for time until the golden-winged monster killed the clone before making his move. Although Patriarch Xue Pao was infuriated, there was nothing he could do. After losing that clone, Patriarch Xue Pao lost at least 500 years of cultivation. It would take at least a few hundred years for him to recover, and Lin Jin was sure that the next time he came, he would be able to crush Patriarch Xue Pao with ease. On the way back, Lin Jin bade farewell to the golden-winged monster and Taoist who, or rather, Curator bade farewell to them. Since Curator had saved the golden-winged monster's son, the golden-winged monster was naturally respectful and didn't ask any questions. Taoist, who was in a similar situation. Thanks to Curator's spell, not only did he manage to save his arm, but he also gained control of the zombie energy, which greatly increased his strength. He even obtained the zombie dragon, which was the biggest gain. Upon hearing that Curator was leaving, Taoist who didn't dare to stop him. After all, Curator was a legendary expert to them. Experts like him could come and go as they pleased, their whereabouts unpredictable. After bidding farewell, Lin Jin rode a cloud westward, traveling thousands of miles until he reached the uninhabited mountain region at the border of Grassy Continent. Only then did he land and cast camouflage to remove Curator's disguise, reverting to Lin Jin's original appearance. During his battle with Patriarch Xue Pao and Taoist corpse, Lin Jin had given himself away a little. For example, he had Xiao Hua as his pet beast. However, since Taoist Hu and the golden-winged monster didn't know much about this, it shouldn't be a problem. Looking into the distance, the west of the Grassy Continent was a desolate land. Although it was still part of the Central Plains, it didn't belong to any of the continents. Another 10,000 miles and one would arrive at the border of the Outer Realm. That place was filled with endless miasma. Ordinary people and beasts would never be able to reach such a place. In fact, the border of the Grassy Continent was already a deserted place. There was still thousands of miles of desolation ahead, with steep cliffs and precipitous cliffs. Even birds would find it difficult to fly, let alone humans. The Outer Realm was the place where immortals were exiled. Lin Jin felt that he would have to visit it sooner or later, but now wasn't the time. Right now, Lin Jin felt like he was still lacking. Although Lin Jin wouldn't be afraid even if he were to face a true immortal with his monster sword, it still wasn't enough. If Lin Jin were to visit the alien lands one day, he had to at least evolve both of his pet beasts to rank 6. Otherwise, it would be too dangerous for him to venture out recklessly. There was no one at the border of Grassy Continent. Lin Jin had only come here to figure out a way for his pet beast to evolve to rank 6. Apart from that, Lin Jin felt like there were many things he needed to ponder about regarding Patriarch Xue Pao's explanation of the fall of immortality and the Heavenly Path's foundation. Could this so-called above the 9 heavens world that Lin Jin had seen before? There were layers upon layers of clouds, countless palaces, and boundless depths. The 9-sky-hanging mountain that Patriarch Xue Pao spoke of was most likely the 9 heavens world that Lin Jin had seen. It was also the place where immortal emperors and immortals resided at the peak of immortality. Lin Jin was curious. How did he see the Nine Heavens world for no reason? Back then, Lin Jin had used the Five Elements Edict to connect to the Nine Heavens world by chance. But ultimately, it was because he borrowed the museum's power. Connecting these clues together, Lin Jin seemed to have thought of something. However, this thought was fleeting and difficult to grasp. Just like a person, all he could see was a blurry silhouette, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make out his facial features. Lin Jin's mind was in a whirl. Having his thoughts in a whirl wasn't a good thing. Lin Jin quickly cleared his mind and calmed himself. For some reason, whenever he thought of the Nine Heavens world and the legendary Heavens Foundation stone that could annihilate immortals, Lin Jin couldn't help but feel agitated. He could only turn his thoughts to other things to calm himself down. Lin Jin began following the museum's method to come up with an evolution method for his two pet beasts. Reaching out, Lin Jin took out a crystal-clear blood bead. It looked like it was condensed from fresh blood. Upon closer inspection, one could see that there was a layer of demonic energy binding this blood bead. This was given to him by the Golden Winged Demon. After the Golden Winged Demon killed Patriarch Shue's clone, he used a special method to refine its essence. To put it bluntly, this blood bead contained Patriarch Shui Pao's centuries of cultivation. With this, Lin Jin could at least promote his second pet beast, the Ghost Blood Beast, to rank 6, increasing its strength by another level. As for Xiaohua, Lin Jin still had to think of a way. There was no one around and no one would disturb Lin Jin. This was the perfect place to evolve his pet beast. Lin Jin released the Ghost Blood Beast. Blood surged under Lin Jin's feet and soon, the blood converged to form a pool of blood. The blood in the pool was boiling, emitting a murderous aura. A rank 5 Ghost Blood Beast was a terrifying existence. Since the Ghost Blood Beast was born from Patriarch Shui Pao, this was a fact that was already set in stone. Hence, using Patriarch Shui Pao's cultivation to evolve the Ghost Blood Beast was the most appropriate choice. Once the evolution was complete, its combat strength would be on par with Patriarch Shue's clone. It might even be slightly stronger. This was undoubtedly a good thing for Lin Jin. Looking at the boiling pool of blood before him, Lin Jin tossed the blood bead into the pool. The droplets of blood instantly sank into the blood pool. At this moment, the blood pool seemed to be boiling. Blood splattered and roared, constantly changing into the shapes of various beasts. In addition, there were countless howls and screams. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the wailing of ghosts and the howling of gods. Lin Jin remained unmoved. This was how the Ghost Blood Beast was. After all, it was a rare beast. Patriarch Shui Pao's centuries of cultivation should be enough to push the Ghost Blood Beast to rank 6. When Lin Jin went up against Patriarch Shui Pao in the future, the Ghost Blood Beast would probably come in handy. After all, Patriarch Shui Pao was only rank 7. The boiling blood pool lasted for half an hour before it gradually calmed down. The next instant, a beam of crimson light shot out from the blood pool, instantly dyeing the surroundings crimson. Lin Jin looked around in bewilderment. Everything seemed to be dyed in a layer of crimson, making it look surreal. Had it been anyone else, they would have been scared out of their wit. But Lin Jin could tell that this was a blood-colored barrier. The Ghost Blood Beast had actually created a barrier. By the looks of it, it was much more advanced than Lin Jin's nebula barrier. Lin Jin reached out and grabbed at the air. Immediately, a hand reached out from the blood pool and grasped Lin Jin's hand. Chapter 6:21. Lin Jin was startled. However, he had weathered many storms so he could keep his composure. As he held the bloody hand, there was a commotion inside the Museum of Deadly Beasts. The color of blood filled the air and Lin Jin could see the current status of the Ghost Blood Beast. Rank 6 Ghost Blood Beast. A rare beast of the 5 elements, can form a clone, seal a barrier, and transform at will. There are two evolution methods, which are. Lin Jin took a deep breath. After this ghost blood beast evolved to rank 6, its strength had increased tremendously. It even had a few more supernatural powers. Reaching out, Lin Jin pulled a person out of the blood pool. This person looked exactly like Lin Jin. Other than being covered in blood, there was no difference. Lin Jin immediately knew that this was one of the rank 6 ghost blood beast's supernatural powers, the ability to form a clone. Just like Patriarch Xue Pao, who couldn't move his body, he could use a clone to fight his enemies. In the future, Lin Jin could do the same, and this clone would be no weaker. To put it bluntly, this clone was much stronger than Lin Jin without any magical equipment to protect himself. After pulling this blood beast clone out, Lin Jin noticed that the blood in the pool hadn't dried up. It had only been reduced by half. This made Lin Jin's heart skip a beat. Clearly, even if the rank 6 ghost blood beast created a clone, it would still have enough energy to protect Lin Jin. In terms of practicality, this rank 6 ghost blood beast had surpassed Xiaohu. It could attack and defend, and it could even create a barrier. However, after giving it some thought, Lin Jin calmed down. The ghost blood beast was indeed powerful, and its evolution to rank 6 was surprisingly smooth. That was because it had obtained the cultivation of Patriarch Xue Pao's clone. It would be much more difficult for the ghost blood beast to evolve in the future. Lin Jin saw that there were only two evolution methods for the ghost blood beast. One was to gather all sorts of treasures that Lin Jin had never heard of before and place the ghost blood beast into the body of a rank 6 pet beast to absorb its soul essence. Only then would there be a 50% chance of evolution. The other method was to devour Patriarch Xue Pao. To Lin Jin, neither of these methods were easy. For the first method, just gathering the necessary resources was already challenging enough. Success might not even be possible even after a few hundred years. Moreover, finding a rank 6 pet beast to devour was no easy feat either. However, the second option was within Lin Jin's scope of consideration. But the problem was, the rarer an exotic beast was, especially one like the ghost blood beast, which was an anomaly even among rare exotic beasts, the harder it was to advance. Even if he devoured Patriarch Xue Pao in the future, Lin Jin reckoned that the spectral blood beast would only evolve to rank 7. For a rank 7 ghost blood beast to reach Patriarch Xue Pao's level, it was considered quite impressive. However, if Lin Jin were to compare it to a rank 9 immortal devourer, it wouldn't stand a chance. The Tao Lord had said that the only way to resist the 9th stage immortal devouring beast was to have a ferocious beast that had also reached the 9th stage. There must be a way for a devil blood beast to ascend to rank 9, but it would be an extremely difficult path. On the other hand, Xiaohu was the most ordinary firewolf beast to begin with. It was very difficult for him to level up in the beginning, but at the same time, once he reached a higher level, it would be slightly easier for him to advance further than the other ghost blood beasts. Of course, this was only relatively speaking. If Xiaohu really wanted to advance to the 9th rank, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. However, the difficulty of the ghost blood beast's advancement was even greater. It was hellish. With this in mind, Lin Jin knew that he had to focus his attention back on Xiaohu. Lin Jin immediately absorbed the remaining ghost blood beasts in the blood pond into his body before releasing Xiaohu. A ball of flames flew out and coalesced into the little fire wolf beast's appearance. It looked around curiously. Lin Jin reached out to pat Xiaohu on the head. As he read the evolution method provided by the museum, he began to devise a plan. Now that the ghost blood beast was rank 6, Lin Jin would have to depend on Patriarch Xue Pao for the next step. In Lin Jin's eyes, Patriarch Xue Pao was merely a stepping stone for the ghost blood beast. Xiaohu needed to advance to rank 6 as soon as possible. A rank 6 beast was equivalent to an immortal. In other words, it was like a human trying to ascend to immortality. Lin Jin had already chosen one of the evolution methods provided by the museum. However, he needed some rare materials and crystals: Phoenix Feather and Nine Suns Crystal. Currently, Lin Jin didn't have these two items. However, he wasn't in a hurry to obtain the Phoenix Feather. With Zhao Jingyan around, he could just ask for some in the visitation hall when he needed them. The Nine Suns Crystal, on the other hand, was a little troublesome. Lin Jin flipped through various books, but he couldn't find a single word about the Nine Suns Crystal. If there were any clues, Lin Jin believed that he wouldn't even frown if he had to travel thousands of miles to find it. At most, he would just visit a few more places. However, if he couldn't even find a trace of the item and its origin was unknown, then that would be troublesome. Fortunately, Lin Jin thought of a possibility. Perhaps the Nine Suns Crystal wasn't a natural product but a man-made creation. So in this world, what kind of artificer would Lin Jin be blind to? The answer was already obvious: immortals. Of course, these were just Lin Jin's guesses. Whether or not it was true was another matter. Still, it was a possibility. Lin Jin planned to ask the two immortal visitors in detail the next time the visitation hall opened. Calculating the time, it was almost time for the next opening of the visitation hall. Hence, Lin Jin spent the next few days at the border of Grassy Continent, stabilizing the Ghost Blood Beast's condition and familiarizing himself with the rank 6 Ghost Blood Beast's supernatural powers while waiting for the visitation hall to open. Studying the Ghost Blood Beast was easy to immerse oneself in. Once immersed, one would easily forget the passage of time. It wasn't until nightfall when the visitation hall's doors opened that Lin Jin snapped out of his daze. Several days had passed since he was immersed in his study, and he didn't even realize it. For the past few days, Lin Jin hadn't had a single drop of water or food. Yet, he didn't feel the slightest bit tired. His stamina and spirit weren't exhausted at all. Lin Jin knew that this was partly due to the improvement in his cultivation and partly due to the enhancement provided by the Ghost Blood Beast. Enhancing one's physique was one of the Ghost Blood Beast's supernatural powers. Now that Lin Jin had a better understanding of the evolved Ghost Blood Beast, he put it aside for now and entered the visitation hall's doors. Inside the visitation hall, many visitors arrived earlier than the last. Those who arrived early were already greeting one another. Other than the two immortal-level newcomers, the others were familiar with each other and chatted casually. If one were to listen closely, they could hear that they were discussing the Black Wind monster sect. Feng Ziqian and a few other visitors had personally attended the sect's opening ceremony, so they obviously had something to talk about. As for the visitors who couldn't attend, they were all filled with regret. Monsters have always been difficult to tame. Most of them are bloodthirsty and brutal. If there's anyone in this world who can restrain monsters and teach them manners, I think that person is none other than the curator, Yi Yuzhou said casually. It was obvious that Yi Yuzhou did not have a good impression of demon beasts. After all, given his position and his past experiences, he had never seen any kind demon beast. Therefore, when he found out that the curator had established a demon cultivation sect to educate the demon beasts, Yi Yuzhou was extremely impressed. Just thinking about it, it was hard to imagine how those wild and untamed monsters could behave like humans, being educated and well-mannered. Chapter 622. Yi Yuzhou was not the only one with such thoughts. The others shared the same thought. Fey beasts have human faces but beast hearts. Most of them are untrustworthy. Old Tian and Black Crow shared the same opinion, especially Black Crow. He was an expert of the heretical path and often interacted with others of the heretical path. The heretical path was also divided into factions. Humans and demons were clearly demarcated. They were usually wary of each other and did not get along well with each other. About that, you guys are overthinking it. At this moment, Feng Ziqian laughed out loud. I personally went to the Black Wind Demon sect. Commander Zhao, didn't you go as well? Zhao Jingyan nodded. Feng Ziqian continued, Fey cultivators are no different from humans, just that their nature is harder to control. But if they are educated by an expert, they will be educated and reasonable like humans. I saw it with my own eyes. There are many powerful characters among the Black Wind Fey sect's Fey cultivators. Their behavior is no different from humans. In fact, if you were to debate with them, you might not even be their match. Feng Ziqian wasn't exaggerating. Everyone nodded. Indeed, even they themselves were different before coming to the visitation hall. Some were heretical experts with cruel methods and violent personalities, while others were composed and knowledgeable. But no matter who it was, they were quickly educated by the curator after coming to the visitation hall. They had to abide by the curator's rules. This was the same for all of them. They did not see the two immortal visitors from the last time. Weren't they obediently waiting for the curator to arrive as well? At the mention of the two immortal visitors, Black Crow, Yi Yuzhou, and the others looked over. After all, they had not interacted much. Therefore, they only exchanged greetings and did not engage in much conversation. However, the two immortals did not put on airs. Yi Yuzhou, Black Crow, and the others were astonished to see immortals with their own eyes. This news was, in fact, very explosive. If it were to spread, it would definitely cause a stir in the various prefectures. But interestingly, many of the visitors had a tacit understanding not to tell others about the immortals. After all, they had not received the curator's approval. If they spread it and made the curator unhappy, it would be troublesome. Qin Yunshang was extremely dignified. She was dressed in immortal robes and had a faint smile on her face. She stood there silently and focused on the metal door on the second floor. Chen Xiankong was the same. When the two returned from the visitation hall, they had told the elders of their respective sects about the situation. The two sects, Cloud Dao sect and Xian Dao sect, took this matter very seriously. In fact, they had been studying this matter for the past 7 days. Even though they had set up many immortal spells and restrictions beforehand, they could not stop or even delay the visitation hall's door. This was quite miraculous. According to the seniors in the sect, the curator's ability to open the portal far surpassed theirs. In other words, the curator's cultivation level was definitely higher than theirs. With this, the two sects senior to the same sect, he the curator, he sect the curator, and Hu the Xiankong. With this in mind, the two immortal sects paid close attention to the visitation hall. They were even cautious. This time, they allowed Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong to follow the rules and enter the visitation hall again to find out more about the curator. At the same time, they wanted to befriend him as much as possible. In fact, in the Cloud Dao sect, after Qin Yunshang bowed and stepped into the visitation hall, the current sect master of the Cloud Dao sect, perfected Xian Yu, cast an immortal spell to probe the rift. But this time, perfected Master Xian Yu's spell was immediately reflected back. Of course, she was the only one who knew this. In an instant, perfected Master Xian Yu's expression became extremely strange. There was even a hint of fear. Why is there an aura of the heavenly Tao? Perfected Master Xian Yu thought to herself. For a moment it was as if there were huge waves crashing in her heart. Inside the visitation hall, the many visitors chatted for a while before the metal door on the second floor was finally pushed open. In an instant, the previously raucous visitation hall fell silent. The veteran visitors were used to this. At this moment, even their backs were straighter than before. There was a complete reverence and pure admiration in their eyes. This scene also fell into the eyes of the two new visitors. Although they had seen it once before, this time it was even more profound. After all, they had just spoken to their seniors in the sect. When the seniors deduced curator's cultivation level, the term carefree immortal was enough to scare them. Hollow immortal, true immortal, and carefree immortal. Anyone who could reach the highest level of immortals, no matter who they were, was worthy of their respect. Due to the decline of the immortal path, a small number of immortal sects could only linger on in foreign lands. Even if all of them were added together, there might not even be a single carefree immortal. Back in the day, carefree immortals were as numerous as the hairs on a cow. But during the great calamity of immortal cultivation, most of them had fallen. Now, the number of carefree immortals in this world could be counted on one hand. Most of them were in seclusion and hadn't shown any signs of activity for centuries. After all, Xian Dao sect had a stronger background. It was said that they still had a carefree immortal in charge, but he was in seclusion. On the other hand, the Cloud Dao sect no longer had a carefree immortal. The strongest they had was a true immortal. Compared to the sect during its peak, it was 100 times weaker. Based on this fact alone, Qin Yunshang and Chen Xuankong's expressions of respect weren't just for show. They were sincere reverence. "Greetings, Curator!" "Welcome, Curator!" In an instant, many visitors greeted Curator. Lin Jin scanned his surroundings and nodded inwardly when he saw the two immortal visitors. In his quest for a material like the Nine Suns crystal, he might have to rely on these two immortals as his last hope. After all, no one had ever heard of what a Nine Suns crystal was anywhere else. But asking questions required proper methods and methods. After all, Lin Jin was using his identity as the curator, so he couldn't reveal his true thoughts. Hence, he had to put on airs when he needed to. It started with the usual questions and answers. The two immortals fought to speak. One of them mentioned that an elder in his sect had an immortal beast that was still in a deep slumber, and he didn't know why. The other asked how the immortal beast could be treated if it was injured. Since this was the two immortal visitors' second time here, they weren't familiar with many of the rules. For example, if they wanted to ask a question, they had to bring a piece of the beast's skin, scales, or something else. Only then could the curator appraise the item and give an answer. However, these two didn't know about it. Or rather, they had forgotten about it. Anyway, they were just asking questions, but they didn't bring anything out. Lin Jin thought about it. Perhaps he hadn't made himself clear before, so he used this opportunity to explain the visitation hall's rules again. At this, Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong quickly nodded. "We were careless. Fellow Taoist Yi did remind us before, but we forgot." The fellow Taoist Yi they were referring to was obviously Yi Yuzhou. Chapter 623. While the other visitors were unorthodox, Yi Yuzhou had always been a practitioner of orthodox cultivation, so he shared a common language with the two immortals. Surprisingly, they shared a good relationship. Seeing that the time was right, Lin Jin raised the question of what the Nine Suns crystal was. Of course, he didn't say he didn't know what the crystal was. On the contrary, he sounded like a teacher asking a student a question. It was as if he was asking how much 1 + 1 equaled. It was the same tone and attitude. Sure enough, other than the two immortal visitors, everyone else, be it Black Crow, Yi Yuzhou, Madame Ghostchild, or Zhao Jingyan, were all deep in thought. None of them had heard of the Nine Suns crystal before. When Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong heard the question, a thought popped into their minds. Curator was indeed a carefree immortal. The reason was simple. Even average immortals didn't know about the Nine Suns crystal. It was a unique material that only true immortals could refine. It could be used to refine weapons and was a must-have for fire elemental immortals. In short, it was useless but extremely rare, mainly because it wasn't something an average pseudo-immortal could refine. As this was their first test as curator, both Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong were extremely attentive. Just as they were about to speak up, they ended up exchanging awkward glances. "It's fine. Let's talk one by one. Qin Yunshang, you go first." Lin Jin abided by ladies first, so he let Qin Yunshang speak first. Based on the two immortal visitors' reactions, Lin Jin knew he had asked the right person. Then, Qin Yunxiang cleared her throat and slowly explained the details of the Nine Suns crystal to Lin Jin. Only then did Lin Jin realize that this was indeed a material that only immortals could refine. It was no wonder why there were no records of Nine Suns crystals in Middle-earth. After all, even among immortals, it was rare to come across such an item. Chen Xuankong's explanation was the same. Based on this, Lin Jin concluded that this was the case. Although Lin Jin now knew what the Nine Suns crystal was, knowing about it and being able to get their hands on it were two different things. Besides, the only people who could get their hands on the Nine Suns crystal were Qin Yunxiang and Chen Xiankong. However, based on their explanation, it was impossible for these two pseudo-immortals to have a material like the Nine Suns crystal. The next question also confirmed this point. Lin Jin didn't hide the fact that his disciple needed a Nine Sun crystal to evolve his pet beast. If it was Qin Yunxiang or Chen Xiankong, Lin Jin would give them a corresponding reward no matter who got them. It was either beast appraisal or treatment. However, upon hearing this, Qin Yunxiang and Chen Xiankong looked troubled. At first, Lin Jin thought they were unwilling, but after asking, he realized the situation was more complicated than he thought. Curator, I've only heard of this Nine Suns crystal, but I've never seen it with my own eyes. It's not exactly a rare item, but not many immortals use it. Lin Jin finally understood after Chen Xiankong explained. Firstly, only true immortals could concoct the Nine Yang crystal. However, most true immortals would have no use for the Nine Yang crystal. Only fire-type immortals would use it when making a breakthrough. During the golden age of immortals, there were many fire-type immortals. There were even immortal sects like the Heavenly Sun Immortal Sect and 100 Refined Flames City. Back then, there were a lot of Nine Suns crystals. After all, demand was high. But now that the path of immortals had fallen, these immortal sects no longer existed and fire-type immortals were few and far between. As for those who managed to reach the realm of true immortals, even if there were a few, they were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Who knows, they might be hiding in some remote corner to cultivate. Coincidentally, be it Xian Dao sect or Cloud Path sect, they didn't specialize in fire-type immortals. Their sects didn't have any fire-type true immortals, not even pseudo-immortals. Hence, they couldn't get their hands on Nine Suns crystals even if they wanted to. This time, Lin Jin finally understood. It wasn't that Qin Yunxiang and Chen Xiankong didn't want to help, but they had no other choice. Are there any fire-type true immortals in the foreign lands? Lin Jin asked. If Xian Dao sect and Cloud Path sect didn't have one, the other sects should have one, right? Qin Yunxiang suddenly said, I've never heard of any fire-type true immortals in the foreign lands. Chen Xiankong nodded. He clearly didn't know either. But we can ask our sect elders when we get back. We should be able to find out, Qin Yunxiang said. Lin Jin didn't think much of it. It was an indisputable fact that the path of immortals had fallen. With the threat of a rank 9 immortal devouring beast, the remaining immortals didn't dare to leave the foreign lands. Moreover, their numbers couldn't be compared to when they were at their peak. Since they had never heard of any fire-type true immortals, even if Qin Yunxiang and Chen Xiankong went back to ask, they wouldn't have much of a chance. Suddenly, a bold idea popped into Lin Jin's mind. Why didn't he go explore the outer realm? Perhaps there would be some unexpected discoveries. Of course, there would definitely be danger, but high risks had high rewards. Just like the Nine Suns crystal, as long as he could get his hands on it, it would be very easy for him to raise Fiery to the 6th rank. However, rank 6 wasn't his final destination. Lin Jin's ultimate goal was to achieve rank 9, and there were no longer any resources in Heartland that could support Xiaohua or the other pet beasts to rank 6 and above. Hence, he had no choice but to go to the foreign lands. In other words, he had to go there sooner or later. So why not go earlier? The thought flashed through Lin Jin's mind, and he became more determined. Next, Lin Jin asked about the foreign lands. Lin Jin wasn't the only one who wanted to know about this. Others like Black Crow, Yi Yuzhou, and the others were equally curious. To them, perhaps one day they too would be able to explore the foreign lands. Perhaps a great opportunity would fall upon them. However, the dangers of the foreign lands were undeniable. Unless one has reached the realm of immortals, a mortal body wouldn't be able to resist the corrosion of the miasma. Qin Yunshang didn't hide anything or exaggerate. At this moment, she took out something. It was a sachet. Lin Jin could feel a unique wave of spirit energy coming from it. This is a cloud fragrance sachet specially crafted by the Cloud Path sect. Wearing it can reduce the corrosion of the miasma. Coincidentally, I have one more with me. If you need it, I can give it to you. Lin Jin was stunned by Qin Yunshang's words. Then, he mused, what a smart fairy. After asking around, it only took him a moment to figure out that Qin Yunshang was interested in the foreign lands and wanted to go there. Moreover, Lin Jin had made it clear that Qin Yunshang's disciple needed a 9 suns crystal for his pet beast to evolve. This meant that Qin Yunshang's disciple wanted to enter the foreign lands. Chapter 624. Perhaps it was for the trial, or perhaps it was for some other purpose. But no matter what, giving him a sachet that could reduce the corrosive effects of the miasma couldn't be wrong. Of course, Qin Yunshang knew that a carefree immortal, like the curator, must have other means to resist or even eliminate the effects of the miasma. But even if the curator had it, Qin Yunshang could still earn a favor. Unbeknownst to Qin Yunshang, her gesture had solved one of Lin Jin's most pressing problems. It was as if she had helped Lin Jin's plan to enter the extraterrestrial realm take a huge step forward. Chen Xiankong hadn't prepared this, but since Qin Yunshang had given it to him, wouldn't he be looked down upon if he didn't reciprocate? Immortals valued their reputation more than anything else, especially in front of a carefree immortal. They couldn't afford to lose face. It was fine if he lost face, but if he lost face for Xian Dao sect, that wouldn't do. Fortunately, Chen Xiankong was prepared as well. He immediately took out a hand-drawn map. The extraterrestrial realm is vast and boundless. Even after hundreds of years of exploration, it's still difficult to get a full picture of it. I have a map with me personally drawn by my senior brother. It records part of the extraterrestrial realm's topography, including the mountains and rivers, as well as some immortal sections. If the curator wishes to explore the extraterrestrial realm, this map might be of some help. At this, Lin Jin looked over with great interest and took the map from her. Good stuff. It only took a little thought to realize how valuable this map was. If one were to really enter the extraterrestrial realm, a map could even save their lives for those who were unfamiliar with the place. The value of this map was immense. Lin Jin thanked him as well, but he felt bad accepting something for nothing. After a moment's thought, he said, I heard that the Cloud Path sect and Xian Dao sect both have immortal beasts. One of them is in a coma while the other is heavily injured. If my disciple has the chance to go to the foreign lands, he will surely pay them a visit and help them solve their problem. Lin Jin nodded. Lin Jin was very confident about this. Weren't immortal beasts just rank 6 beasts? Lin Jin was a professional. Forget rank 6, even if it was a rank 7 beast, as long as he had the Museum of Deadly Beasts, there was no problem he couldn't solve. Hence, Lin Jin would definitely repay this favor. Although he didn't directly resolve Qin Yunshang and Chen Xuankong's problems, Lin Jin proceeded to explain the beast appraisal mystic art to them. It benefited the 2 hollow immortals immensely. When Lin Jin thought it was about time to leave, Chen Xiankong thought for a moment and couldn't resist calling out, Curator, please wait. Stunned, Lin Jin glanced at Chen Xiankong. The man clearly had something to say. Chen Xiankong thought for a moment and said, There's something I'd like to ask the curator. Lin Jin didn't understand why she was acting so bashful. On the other hand, a glint flashed across Qin Yunshang's eyes as if she had thought of something. The corners of her lips curled up. Chen Xiankong stole a glance at Qin Yunshang. Finally, he made up his mind and said, "Curator, if you were to encounter a tyrannical immortal beast that you cannot afford to offend or defeat, yet it is blocking your path, how should you deal with it in order to drive it away?" At this, Lin Jin fell into deep thought. The Xian Dao sect cared a lot about their face. If he wasn't wrong, they must have encountered a similar problem. Maybe it wasn't the road that was blocked, but the Xian Dao sect. In the end, it was Chen Xuankong's words. He couldn't afford to offend or defeat it. But he still had to get rid of this problem. Noticing Chen Xuankong's expression, Lin Jin guessed that he probably didn't want Qin Yunshang to laugh at him. But compared to his reputation, solving this problem was more important. Lin Jin already owed the Xian Dao sect a favor, so he had to help them. What immortal beast? Does it have fur, scales, or blood? Lin Jin asked. Other beasts aside, Lin Jin could easily identify even a rank 9 immortal devouring beast. Other beasts aside, Lin Jin could easily identify. This time, Chen Xiankong took out an item. It was a 2-foot-long barb with alternating black and white stripe. It also looked like some kind of unique hair. Chen Xiankong handed it over. Lin Jin touched it and immediately, the Museum of Deadly Beasts showed him the corresponding identification result. Needless to say, Lin Jin raised an eyebrow at this sight. Rank 7 beast, Black Mountain Honey Badger. Ferocious, aggressive, fearless, stubborn, and will not rest until one of them dies. Habits are evolution method. Reading the rank 7 pet beast's description, Lin Jin was astounded. This outworld was truly a dangerous place. Any random pet beast here could be compared to Patriarch Xue Pao's true form. It was no wonder that Patriarch Xue Pao was born in an extraterrestrial land. In other words, the continents of Middle-earth were a barren land for beasts. It was difficult for high-level beasts to be born. The extraterrestrial land was the true cradle for high-level beasts. This made Lin Jin's heart skip a beat. Everything else aside, just the variety of high-level beasts here was worth a trip. If he could include more high-level beasts in the Museum of Deadly Beasts, he might even be able to trigger the museum's other rewards. Hence, the extraterrestrial land became even more attractive to Lin Jin. Right now, he had to help Chen Xiankong and the others solve the problem of this Black Mountain Honey Badger. According to Chen Xiankong and the others, a rank 7 beast was equivalent to a true immortal. Indeed, if this was a true immortal beast, according to the museum's description, its fur could withstand most spells. It could even be said to be immune to them. In that case, most immortals would be helpless against a rank 7 beast. They couldn't afford to provoke it or defeat it. Of course, that was because they didn't have a solution. Everything in this world had a solution. Take the Black Mountain Honey Badger for example. It had a fur that could withstand spells and was as strong as a small mountain. An adult Black Mountain Honey Badger was more than 50 feet tall. If it went berserk, it would be difficult to defend against it. However, no matter how powerful a beast was, it had a weakness. Dealing with it based on its weakness was the so-called solution. Lin Jin pondered for a moment. In fact, he was looking for the rank 7 honey badger's weakness. Then, Lin Jin said, "This beast is called a Black Mountain Honey Badger. Its strength is equivalent to a true immortal. It'll be difficult to kill it, but it'll be easy to drive it away." At this, Chen Xiankong was overjoyed. The situation was pretty much the same as Lin Jin had guessed. A few days ago, a giant honey badger had appeared in front of Xian Dao Sect's mountain gate. This immortal beast was the size of a small hill, and it just lay in front of Xian Dao Sect's mountain gate, refusing to leave. This troubled the immortals of Xian Dao Sect greatly. No matter what, Xian Dao Sect was one of the immortal sections. They had their own reputation, and they couldn't allow a beast to block their mountain gate. If that happened, the immortals of Xian Dao sect would have no choice but to enter through the back door. They couldn't afford to lose face. Chapter 625. However, it was just as Chen Xiankong had said. No one from the Xian Dao sect could defeat the rank 7 Black Mountain Honey Badger, let alone kill it. The badger was very vengeful and refused to leave. They couldn't lure it away even if they wanted to. Hence, Chen Xiankong decided to ask the curator for a solution. He was just giving it a try. After all, Chen Xiankong didn't think the curator was capable of doing so. Now that he heard that the curator had a way to get rid of the badger, Chen Xiankong was all ears. Of course, it was for the best. Lin Jin called the man over and whispered into his ear. Chen Xuankong's expression changed several times before realization dawned on him. With a look of pleasant surprise, he bowed at Lin Jin. "Curator, you are so knowledgeable. If you can really get rid of that annoying Black Mountain Honey Badger, the entire Xian Dao sect will be eternally grateful." Chen Xiankong was eager to return home. After all, he wasn't the only one troubled by this. The Black Mountain Honey Badger had become a sore point for the entire Xian Dao sect. From the sect master to the average disciple, everyone treated this as their top priority. Now that there was a solution, Chen Xiankong didn't want to wait a moment longer. As for the method the curator taught him, Chen Xiankong knew it would work. After all, Chen Xiankong was a hollow immortal, so he had some common sense. Chen Xiankong quickly excused himself. Lin Jin wanted to go out and think about it, so he left as well. As for the other visitors in the visitation hall, they could stay for a while longer to interact with each other. Qin Yunshang wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, she greeted the other visitors and asked about the curator's situation. She was also curious about the customs of Middle-earth. Back when the great immortal Dao calamity occurred, Qin Yunshang was still young and had just entered the Cloud Dao sect. Over the past 2,000 years, she had been cultivating in an outer realm sect. Even when she ventured outside, she only went to the surrounding outer realm land. She had never been to the central plains. Now, Middle-earth was a forbidden land for immortals. Naturally, she was very curious about the human race's homeland. Previously, she only knew a little about it from some of her fellow disciples. After all, those fellow disciples had not been to the Central Plains for a long time, just like her. Now that there were other visitors, she naturally had to seize this opportunity. It was possible that she would never be able to step into the Central Plains again in this lifetime. However, the more this was the case, the more she yearned for her true hometown. As a woman, Qin Yunshang quickly became familiar with He Qing, Madame Ghostchild, and Zhao Jingyan. The four of them conversed harmoniously. Setting them aside, after Lin Jin exited the visitation hall, he began to come up with a plan. Although Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong had promised to find a way to locate the Nine Suns crystal and try their best to get their hands on one, Lin Jin could tell from their expressions that this would be a difficult task. Ignoring Qin Yunshang, Chen Xiankong and company probably had to first get rid of the Black Mountain Honey Badger that was blocking the entrance. Even if he could help him search everywhere, what were the chances of him actually getting it? After all, it was unknown whether or not there were any true immortals in the Outer Realm. Since that was the case, he definitely couldn't just walk on one leg. Since he knew how to raise Xiaohua to the 6th rank and reach the level of an immortal beast, he shouldn't wait any longer. Lin Jin felt that he had to take the initiative. Outside the realm, Lin Jin planned to make a trip there. Not in the future, but now. In terms of strength, Lin Jin was still a step away from becoming an immortal. But that didn't stop him from having so many treasures in his possession. Immortal Binding Rope, 4 Seas Gourd, and Breezy Sword. These items could both attack and defend. Even without his pet beast, he could stand shoulder to shoulder with an immortal. Lin Jin had absolute confidence in this. Just the Breezy Sword alone was no different from those so-called immortal swords. In addition, Lin Jin had the immortal level rank 6 Ghost Blood Beast. If he could create a Ghost Blood clone, escaping wouldn't be a problem. If he could help Xiaohua level up successfully, it would all be worth it. There was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. If he wanted to improve his strength and crush his enemies, he had to take risk. After figuring this out, Lin Jin made up his mind. Steady. Summoning the cloud again, Lin Jin rode it and continued westward. He had to pass through a deserted land for thousands of miles before he could enter the outer realm. This time, Lin Jin steered the cloud with all his might. Due to his increase in strength, Lin Jin's speed was much faster than the average eagle. Although it still couldn't compare to the golden-winged monster's insane speed, it was still extraordinary. For 2 days and 2 nights, Lin Jin didn't stop for a single moment. Everywhere he looked was desolate. There were only yellow sand and rock. At first, he could see some trees and grass, but after a day, everything was gray. There was no vegetation at all. It was as if he had entered a land of death. If mortals and beasts entered a place like this, death was certain. They couldn't possibly walk out alive. This area was like a border of death, separating the outer realm from the continents of Middle-earth. In other words, even experts with decent cultivation and eagle beasts would face great danger if they tried to cross this area. Strange winds and sandstorms. Just these alone were like an invisible wall, as if this was the end of the world. When Lin Jin saw an endless wall of miasma in the distance, he finally perked up from his dull and numb mood. He finally saw it. Truth be told, Lin Jin had only heard about the outer realm. Now that he was seeing it with his own eyes, he was astounded. Who would have thought that this miasma was like a wall that was tens of thousands of feet tall, stretching out for tens of thousands of miles? At this height, Lin Jin couldn't see the end of it. Even after seeing the miasma wall, Lin Jin had to fly over on his cloud for several hours. When he finally got closer, Lin Jin was astounded once more. The miasma wall separated the outer realm from Middle-earth. In other words, by taking a step forward, one would be entering the outer realm. Turning back would bring one back to Middle-earth. Lin Jin knew that most immortals had fallen during the great calamity of immortality. Only a few managed to escape into the miasma wall to avoid the rank 9 immortal devouring beast's pursuit. As for why the rank 9 immortal devouring beast wouldn't chase after them, no one knew. But without a doubt, the outer realm was now the immortals' last refuge. They had been hiding here for thousands of years. Besides immortals, due to the harsh environment in the outer realm, even the beasts were more ferocious than the last. Taking a deep breath, Lin Jin stepped into the miasma. The invasion of the miasma wasn't as intense as Lin Jin imagined. Perhaps it was because of the sachet Qin Yunshan gave him, or because Lin Jin had used the 4 Seas Freedom Gourd to condense a layer of water vapor to protect himself. Of course, it was also possible that Lin Jin had used the Ghost Blood Beast to strengthen his body. Chapter 6:26. In any case, the miasma was affecting Lin Jin. But from the looks of it, it was negligible, so it wasn't a big deal. This made Lin Jin feel much more at ease. He had been worried that he wouldn't be affected by the miasma due to his lack of an immortal's physique. Now, it seemed like he didn't have to worry about that anymore. And so, Lin Jin stepped into the miasma. Lin Jin turned around to look. Looking out from within the miasma, it was as if he was looking through a special medium to another medium. It was like looking at something in the water. Lin Jin could feel a unique spirit energy here. It was stronger than outside, but it was still far from the extent of spirit energy during the golden age of immortality, as described in some ancient text. Also, unlike the barren land outside, there was a lot of vegetation here. It felt like he was in a dense forest. What an interesting experience. A few meters behind him was a barren land. But within the miasma, it was like a tropical rainforest with lush vegetation. Lin Jin didn't ride on a cloud because it would be too conspicuous. After walking for a while, Lin Jin suddenly stopped. He was surrounded by towering trees with strange layers of leaves. If there was something hidden in the forest, he wouldn't be able to see it. However, while the vegetation could block his vision, it couldn't block his senses. Lin Jin was especially sensitive to beasts. Since earlier, he had sensed something amiss. The wind carried a fishy stench and danger lurked everywhere. Suddenly, something strange happened. A shadow suddenly pounced out from the cover of the vegetation, heading straight for Lin Jin. This shadow was huge, and when it opened its mouth, the stench was overwhelming. Lin Jin was already prepared. Before the shadow pounced, he had already flicked his finger. Lin Jin's acupuncture technique was no longer what it used to be. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it had reached perfection. When the shadow opened its mouth, as if struck by lightning, it couldn't move at all. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. At a closer look, Lin Jin realized that the shadow was a large python that could be hugged by a man. This python was completely different from the ones Lin Jin usually saw. This one had grass and flowers growing on its body. If it had been hiding in the forest, it would have been difficult to spot it. Moreover, when the python opened its mouth, it revealed several rows of sharp teeth. There was also a retractable proboscis at its throat that could be ejected to tear its prey apart. Lin Jin had never seen such a vicious and savage beast before. But no matter what, it was still a beast. Lin Jin used the spirit refinement technique to pierce its acupoints. At the same time, he used his beast aura to subdue the anaconda. Grass Skin Ghost Python, Rank 5. Good at concealment, fond of flesh and blood, Yang loathing fire. The method of advancement is, upon contact, the anaconda's information appeared and Lin Jin immediately grasped all the information about this foreign beast. To Lin Jin's surprise, this rank 5 anaconda was a female, and it was about to give birth to its young. That was why it needed a lot of food. Moreover, the reproduction rate of this kind of beast was extremely terrifying. It would inject the young python through its mouth into the prey's body, and then the young python would grow rapidly in the prey's body. In other words, this guy just intended to get the young python into his body and then use it as an incubator for the young python. Just thinking about it was enough to know how terrifying that outcome would be. What's the use of keeping a demonic beast like you? Lin Jin looked at this ghost python. Other than being ferocious and terrifying, there was nothing good about it. Moreover, forming a blood pact with it was extremely difficult. Leaving it alive would only bring trouble. Drag on fire. Invoking a spell, Lin Jin opened his mouth and a stream of scorching fire surged out. With a crackling sound, the gigantic rank 5 grass skin ghost python was instantly burned to ashes. Lin Jin easily destroyed a rank 5 pet beast just like that. This proved that Lin Jin's current strength had reached an incredible level. However, not long after he stepped foot into the foreign territory, he was ambushed by a foreign beast. Lin Jin now understood that this place was much more dangerous than Heartland. He would have to be more careful in his future operations. He couldn't afford to be careless. Lin Jin continued deeper into the foreign territory. Moments later, he turned back to find that the miasma wall was no longer there. All he could see were towering trees ranging from 100 feet to 1,000 feet tall and endless vegetation. Half a day later, Lin Jin arrived at the top of a mountain. The peak wasn't tall, less than half the height of the surrounding trees. However, it was still considered a high ground. Looking down from this height, everything was clear and spacious. The scenery here isn't bad, Lin Jin mumbled to himself. Prior to this, he had assumed that the foreign territory would be desolate and dangerous. But now that he was here, he realized that while it was dangerous, this place wasn't exactly desolate. Putting aside the grassy continent, it was not inferior to the central continent or the southern continent. Other than the miasma, Everything here was much larger than the central continent. Larger mountains, larger plants. After all, no one had ever seen a 1,000-foot tall tree in Heartland. Speaking of which, this tree was a unique species. 10 people couldn't even wrap their arms around its trunk. There was also grass that was taller than humans and mushrooms that looked like roofs. Lin Jean recalled that this place could be described as a land of giants. Everything should be huge. Lin Jin's imagination ran wild. Chapter 6:27. As a newcomer, Lin Jean was naturally curious about the giant spirit and bear. Hence, he concealed his aura and followed behind them. Due to their massive size, Lin Jean wouldn't lose sight of them even if he was a little further away. Hence, Lin Jean kept his distance so that he wouldn't be discovered. Along the way, Lin Jean could tell that the giant spirit was very familiar with his surroundings. Lin Jean had long lost his sense of direction. That's weird. Why do I feel like someone's following us? The giant spirit's left gate stabbed his flag-like spear into the soft soil before sitting down to rest. Behind him, the giant bear sat down with a charmingly naive look. After the giant bear sat down, it looked like a small hill. The giant bear was obviously not interested in the giant spirit's words. After it sat down, it looked around and scratched the big tree next to it with its claws. Its sharp claws scraped off the bark, revealing the trunk inside. A few thick worms inside the trunk panicked. It was as if someone had suddenly opened the roof of their house. Anyone would panic if they were in their shoes. Before the fat bugs could escape, the giant bear caught them and stuffed them into its mouth. The giant bear chewed on them with relish. Each bug was as thick as a human's thigh. They weren't small, but to the giant bear, they were nothing more than snacks. Eat, eat. You silly bear, you only know how to eat. Other than your size, you're nothing, the giant spirit said. Although his words were harsh, there was a hint of affection in his tone. The giant bear didn't seem to care. It continued foraging for food as if saying, "You talk, I'll eat." Right at this moment, a stream of light flashed past, heading straight for the left side of the giant spirit beast. The originally charmingly naive giant bear suddenly acted out of character at this time. It swept its claws, and a series of claw winds tore through the air, making crackling sounds like thunder exploding in the ears. With that, the ray of light was blocked. With a flash, the ray of light transformed into a human figure. He laughed and said, "Left gate, your silly bear doesn't look very smart usually, but it's amazing when it comes to critical moments. Even with my new supernatural power, I don't dare to fight it head-on." The person who spoke was dressed like a vagrant. He was slovenly and his clothes were patched up. However, his aura was rich and mellow as immortal energy flowed around him. Even someone with poor eyesight could tell that this was an immortal. In addition, there was a sword hanging on this person's back. The body of the sword was overflowing with light and vibrant colors. It had no scabbard and looked as if it had been polished from a piece of yellow crystal. Its texture was extremely unique. When the silly bear saw that it knew this person, it immediately sat down and returned to its original naive appearance. It was as if the ferocious, violent bear was a completely different bear from it. "Loose cultivator Yellowstone, you're a good person, but you like to joke around. If silly bear can't hold back and injures you next time, I won't care," Left Gate of Giant Spirit said. Loose cultivator Yellowstone laughed and didn't care at all. Then, his nose twitched as he looked left and right. Then, he said, "Left Gate, you brought someone else?" As he spoke, his gaze shifted to where Lin Jean was hiding 1,000 feet away. Now, Lin Jean knew he had been exposed. After all, he was tailing an immortal, so Lin Jean didn't expect to remain undetected. His plan was to avoid making enemies as much as possible, and instead, he wanted to make more friends and learn more about this foreign land. In the next instant, the yellow crystal longsword on Loose Cultivator Yellowstone's back glowed, and he was already in front of Lin Jean. Lin Jin had witnessed loose cultivator Yellowstone's supernatural powers earlier, so he wasn't surprised by the man's teleportation spell. Lin Jin tidied his clothes and raised a hand in salute. The ground shook as giant spirits left gate and the silly bear rushed over. Left gate of giant spirit stared at Lin Jin before scratching his head. I knew it. It felt like someone was following us. Who are you? Lin Jin of Central Continent. Lin Jin was a polite man. Whenever he introduced himself, he would always mention a place. Lin Jin was used to calling it his hometown. Sure enough, both giant spirits left gate and loose cultivator Yellowstone were stunned. What is this Central Continent? Left gate asked immediately. Yellowstone shook his head. It's an unknown place, but that's not the point. Why did you follow Left gate all the way here? Seeing that these two immortals were easy to talk to, Lin Jin didn't hide anything and answered, Lin Jin has just arrived and it's his first time encountering a giant spirit. I was curious, so I followed you all the way here. I have no ulterior motives and I bear no ill will. Usually, most people wouldn't pursue the matter after hearing this. Of course, that didn't rule out the possibility of a conflict breaking out. Still, since Lin Jin dared to follow them, he was confident that even if he couldn't win, he could still escape. Yellowstone glanced at giant spirit's left gate and the latter nodded. That's true. If he had ulterior motives or carried a murderous aura, I would have sensed it long ago. Same goes for Han Xiong. But while our tribe is rare, it's not uncommon. Could it be that you've been cultivating in seclusion and this is your first time coming out? Yellowstone nodded. That should be the case. He looks like one too. As the two echoed each other, Lin Jin smiled bitterly. But it didn't matter. Letting them think what they thought would save him a lot of trouble. Lin Jin was also sure that neither this giant spirit nor Yellowstone knew about Central Continent. Otherwise, they would have sensed it earlier. What followed was a conversation. Lin Jin was polite. Both Left Gate and Yellowstone were immortals. Be it in age or cultivation, they were above him. As a junior, it was only right for him to show them respect. On the other hand, Zhuo Men and Huang Shi assumed Lin Jin to be a disciple of some immortal sect. Disciples of immortal sects were usually arrogant and rarely treated itinerant immortals with politeness. Because of this, both of them had a good impression of Lin Jin, and after a while, their relationship gradually improved. Fellow Lin, since you're here to gain experience, you should be free and do whatever you want. It just so happens that Zhuo Men and I are going to the legendary spirit pool of the Immortal Queen to take a look. Why don't we go together? Huang Shi loose practitioner casually invited. Left Gate nodded in agreement. If there's nothing else, we can take care of each other. After all, it's dangerous to train alone. Lin Jin couldn't be happier. If the two hadn't asked, he would have thought of a way to follow them. But now that they were inviting him, how could he refuse? And so, they hit it off. They were now familiar with each other. Giant Spirits Left Gate. Despite his name, he didn't have a surname. It was normal for the giant spirit tribe to have no surnames. Left Gate was considered an anomaly among the giant spirits. Since ancient times, the giant spirit tribe had been following immortals and was considered their right-hand man. But Left Gate didn't like it. He preferred to be alone and he liked to tame beasts. He had raised Han Xiong since he was young. Chapter 628. Lin Jin took this opportunity to appraise Han Xiong. Once he did, he was shocked. Just as he expected, Han Xiong was a rank 6 pet beast. Rank 6 was considered an immortal beast. In addition, Han Xiong had a strong physique and was already 104 years old. Despite its size, it was still considered a child in this foreign land. Having raised Han Xiong for 100 years, Zhuo Men's minds were connected. Although there was no blood contract between them, their bond was deeper than that. As for Yellowstone, he was a famous itinerant immortal nearby. He belonged to no sect, and was the servant of a minor immortal during the great calamity of immortality. Later on, he escaped to this foreign land by chance. Back then, he was still young, and after cultivating slowly, he became an immortal. However, immortals were everywhere in this foreign land, so Yellowstone's cultivation level was only so. That yellow crystal sword on his back, however, was extraordinary. It was said that Yellowstone came across this crystal by chance and spent 60 years polishing it into a sword. At the same time, he studied his supernatural powers and gained some fame. His sword shone brightly and its energy was like a rainbow. Its specialty was its speed. It was like light. However, the sword energy was only average. Just like earlier, it was broken by Han Xiong's claw. It was obvious that its power was limited. But that was only for immortals. Lin Jin was especially envious of Han Xiong after his appraisal. Han Xiong was a rare beast among immortal beasts with great potential for growth. Moreover, after activating its bloodline, it would receive a supernatural power. And that supernatural power was mountain blood. With a single transformation, Han Xiong could grow to the size of a mountain. With that, no matter who the enemy was, Han Xiong could simply slap them and no one would be able to stop him. Even if it was an immortal sect, if Han Xiong was angered, he could grow to the size of a mountain and come and go as he pleased. Any immortal sect would be reduced to a pile of rubble. However, Han Xiong hadn't activated mountain blood yet. Lin Jin went through Han Xiong's evolution and bloodline activation method in his mind and chuckled self-deprecatingly, musing that his occupational habit was acting up again. Seeing a pet beast that he had never seen before made him feel more passionate than seeing a beautiful woman. Along the way, Han Xiong was feeling a little guilty from Lin Jin's gaze. Zhuo Men, Huang Shi and the others had agreed to meet nearby. Their goal was to go to the spirit pool of the Immortal Empress to take a look. Back then, the Celestial Emperor's glory was boundless. He had many immortal concubines, but the Celestial Empress only had one, and her cultivation had long since reached the carefree immortal realm. This Celestial Empress had once refined a magic treasure called the Celestial Treasure Spirit Pool. Rumor has it that it is very mysterious. On the way, Huang Shi Sanren was showing off his knowledge. Lin Jin listened attentively. He really didn't know about these things before and it was more believable to hear it from an immortal. On the other hand, the Great Spirit Left sect was very good at undermining the stage. Marvelous? What's so special about it? Zhuo Men asked. Loose cultivator Huang Shi was speechless. This I don't know. After all, I haven't seen it with my own eyes. It is said that during the great battle of the Immortal Palace, the Immortal Queen's spiritual pool was also destroyed. A large piece of it fell here. Every 100 years, a pool of spiritual water will be gathered here. Regardless of whether it is for immortals or beasts, it is very beneficial. Oh right, it is the same for magical treasures. As he spoke, loose cultivator Huang Shi caressed the yellow crystal sword on his back with a loving look on his face. It was hard to imagine a man showing such an expression towards a sword. Lin Jin quickly averted his eyes. However, Lin Jin listened to loose cultivator Huang Shi's words. Does this mean that the day of the spirit pool's 100 years of water gathering is here again? Lin Jin asked. Haha, brother Lin, you've hit the nail on the head. Yellowstone nodded. That's right. These few days will be the day of the 100 years. That's why, brother Lin, it's better to come at the right time than to come early. Since you're here, let's go together. Forget about bathing in the spirit pool to reap any benefits, we should at least go take a look. Perhaps we might be able to reap some benefits. But on second thought, it made sense. For itinerant immortals like Zhuo Men and Yellowstone, without the protection of a sect, they had to rely on themselves. Indeed, they couldn't let go of any opportunities. Lin Jin could tell that since the Queen of Fairies' spirit pool only appeared once every 100 years, there must be a lot of immortals eyeing it. Most itinerant immortals went there just to join in the fun. They might not be able to reap any benefit. But just as Yellowstone said, if they went, there was still a chance. If they didn't, there would be no chance at all. The Queen of Fairies' spirit pool is indeed worth a visit, Lin Jin thought. Lin Jin mused. Although Lin Jin's main purpose in coming to the foreign lands was to search for the Nine Suns crystal, he couldn't miss out on other opportunities. According to Yellowstone and the others, since the Queen of Fairies' spirit pool was beneficial to immortals, immortal beasts, and artifacts, it was definitely worth a visit. Lin Jin took the opportunity to ask giant spirits Left Gate and Yellowstone about the Nine Suns crystal, to see if they knew anything about it. The results were just as Lin Jin expected. Giant spirits Left Gate looked confused. After all, he had no idea about a material that could only be refined by a true immortal. To put it bluntly, Zhuomen was just a foreigner who hadn't seen much of the world. In terms of knowledge, he probably wasn't as knowledgeable as Lin Jin. Yellowstone, on the other hand, was knowledgeable. At the mention of the Nine Suns crystal, he asked, "Nine Suns crystal that can only be refined by a fire-tempered immortal?" Upon hearing this, Lin Jin nodded. "That's right. Does Brother Yellowstone know where I can get it?" Yellowstone quickly shook his head. "I don't know about that. I only heard it from others." "Oh my, a fire-tempered immortal. I wonder if there's still an expert like that around." Lin Jin's heart sank. Just as Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong had said, if orthodox disciples like them couldn't get their hands on it, what more an itinerant immortal like Yellowstone? However, I did hear that 2,000 years ago, a fire-tempered true immortal expert perished. His cosmos ring shattered in the sky and countless treasures from the ring were scattered in the Treasure Fall Mountain. Perhaps there are 9 suns crystals among them. However, there are too many ferocious beasts there. Let alone loose immortals, even some experts from immortal sects rarely go there. The advantage of traveling with an itinerant immortal was that he could hear all sorts of strange news. For example, this Treasure Fall Mountain was Lin Jin's first time hearing about it. Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong obviously didn't know about it either. However, whether or not Treasure Fall Mountain was as Yellowstone said was a different story. To Lin Jin, it was already a miracle that this rumor had a 20% chance of being true. To put it bluntly, if a fire-tempered immortal's universe ring had really shattered, all sorts of treasures would have been scattered all over the place. How could Lin Jin possibly have a chance? After all, this incident didn't just happen yesterday. 9 Suns crystals weren't easy to obtain, so Lin Jin could only continue asking around and looking for opportunities. As for the Queen of Immortals Spirit Pond, based on what Zhuomen and Yellowstone had said, it was a good idea to check it out. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.